It is 5:02. I now call to order the June 15th, 2020 board meeting of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. A quorum of board members is present. We're meeting this evening under authority of Texas Government Code Section 551.045 and with the authority of the Governor's Office via video conference to advance the public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings to slow the spread of coronavirus, which is COVID-19. I'd like to take this time to thank our administration and technology staff for making the technology possible for the board to meet in this manner. This meeting is being live streamed on the board's YouTube channel and recorded. The recording will be made available to the public. Additionally, members of the public who seek to exercise their right under state law to address the board on an item on the agenda for tonight's meeting have the ability to do so in the manner listed on the notice for this meeting. We would like for you to join us at this time for a moment of silence and or prayer or meditation. If you'll just please join us. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to these Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comments. As I noted a moment ago, to comment on an item for today's agendas, members of the public were instructed to submit their comments to be read into the record. Elizabeth, would you please read any comments that we received from members of the public?
No comments were submitted.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We'll just move on to our board workshop and committee reports. First item on the agenda would be the 2021 school year planning report and discussion. Dr. Matt Smith.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. It's great to see you again this evening and appreciate your time. This is a workshop presentation, so please feel free to interrupt along the way and let's have good dialogue if you have questions. I think pretty much every board and superintendent across the state are having similar conversations right now about where we are in the planning for the upcoming school year. Next slide, please. The purpose of this report tonight and this workshop discussion is for us to dive into that and talk a little bit about our planning efforts, but to also gather some insight and feedback from you all as board members about what the key things that you think we should be thinking about during this planning process. Next slide. So as you all know, we've had some decision-making inputs along the way throughout this COVID challenge that we've been faced with. First, and again, I'll refer back to the story on this one, COVID-19 closure started the day after spring break in Belton ISD. And on that first day, I met with our principals and said, I need to know as a new person in this district, what are the values of the community? What should guide us throughout this process so that we can all be pointed in the same direction? According to the principals, those things were clarity in our communication, kindness in our approach, and unity in our purpose. And unity in our purpose meaning we're really about kids here in Belton ISD. So we have used those as key decision-making inputs for us throughout the COVID closure. Second thing is safety in looking at the data that we found through COVID-19. As I've mentioned many other times, we work with the commissioner every Tuesday and Thursday as superintendents across the state and have commissioner conference calls. At the beginning of each one of those, he usually refers to all the data points that they're monitoring throughout the state regarding the number of active cases, the number of tests, the number of unfortunate fatalities that we've experienced due to all of this. And so we continue to use that data at the state level, but also probably most importantly at a local level through Bell County as well. We have used guidance from the state, from our local health authorities and local elected officials, and also national recommendations and worldwide recommendations like from the CDC. And we also, in all of this, have tried to keep a mindset on what are we really about here in Belton ISD? What are those goals that we're really striving for? And we will continue using these types of things for decision-making inputs along the way. Next slide. So I wanted to be real deliberate tonight and provide you all with some of this. And also I made these links so our public could see them if they really wanted to see as well. But there are a lot of inputs that we have when it comes to the guidance for school opening. And I think sometimes that's confusing for our public as a whole. I know that there have been lots of questions about, hey, the governor makes an announcement and then why does it take schools so long to respond along the way? Well, the governor might make an announcement with executive orders, but then what happens is Texas Education Agency, or TEA, takes those executive orders, interprets those, and provides guidance for the school districts. And so you can see there kind of some of these links that we use on a regular basis. We have to obviously use our local elected officials like Judge Blackburn, his executive orders and guidance and all of this. We use Bell County's guidance for this, but we also use the Texas Education Agency. And the link that I provided there should give our public and our board members some insight regarding what kind of guidance we're receiving. Since the beginning of this COVID pandemic that we've been faced with in the state of Texas, I think everyone would be amazed at the amount of guidance and support that TEA has produced for us. I'm talking pages and pages, hundreds of pages, probably thousands of pages at this point of guidance that they are providing to school districts. And so our job on a regular basis is to see what they've updated, use that information, and provide the best recommendations possible for Belton ISD moving forward. Obviously, the CDC has played a big role in providing input for our federal leaders and our state leaders regarding what the best way to go about things might be. And then we also use legal advice along the way. Next slide. So the big question I think that's on everyone's mind is what's going to happen in the fall? And I think underlying that is who makes the call and what can be decided? Like, is this really a local control situation or not? And the way I would answer that is this: local school districts get to determine our reentry plans, but we have to use that guidance from TEA, from the governor, from everybody to make sure that we are creating the best plans possible for our school district and for our kids. Next slide. So a couple of things in all of this here, and I want to spend a little time talking about this. We are really focused now on not just being reactive to the COVID situation, but to try and be proactive for the upcoming school year and think about what we're really trying to accomplish. That first one, exceptional student learning experiences for every student. I'm going to dive into that in more depth in just a minute on this. But we have to remember our core purpose as a school district in all of this, and that's the education of our students. Sometimes we get in the habit of responding, reacting to things like the COVID-19 pandemic, and we lose sight of that focus. I'm proud of the work we've done in Belton ISD of making sure that kids remain the focus, but for the fall, we want to take it to that next level, that idea of exceptional experiences no matter what for kids. The second is safe and healthy schools, and that means for not only our students, but for our staff and our community. So in order to actually create a reentry plan that is supportive of our community, we have to try and figure out a way to make sure that we are serving every member of our community and every family member in our community. And that means that we have some staff members that might not be able to come back face-to-face due to underlying health concerns. We might have some families that might not want to send their students back face-to-face at this time. And the flip side of that is we know we have families that want to get back to normal and we want to see kids face-to-face. In all of this, our job is to make sure both our staff, our students, and our community try and remain healthy through it all. So whatever plan we create has to be safe and healthy for our students. Secondly is that idea of staff support. There's a lot of moving pieces in all of this. And so what we know is that in the last 9 weeks of the school year, the instructional model for Belton ISD took a drastic turn, right? We know that we weren't face-to-face, and all of a sudden, teachers and staff members were faced with a challenge of providing learning experiences in a manner that they just were not familiar with on a regular basis. So our job is to make sure throughout all of this that we are not only creating the plan, but providing the right support and learning experiences for our staff so that they can be successful in whatever environment might be in front of them. This fourth bullet is a bigger one, the community clarity and stability. I know this, I get told this on a regular basis when I interact with community members, and I heard it a little bit this morning as well at the beef golf tournament. Our community is back to work in a lot of ways, and they're wondering what we are doing with the kids that they have in their households in the fall. That idea of clarity regarding a plan, everybody wants that, myself included. We all want to be able to say, here's what we're doing, here's when we're going to do it, and here's how we're going to do it. The stability piece is something that's really important for families, and I think we're going to hear more about this throughout the summer, especially from our elected officials. In order to get Texas back to work and things functioning, I think a lot of our families, particularly at the elementary level, need to know that their kids are going back to school and face-to-face, and they need to be able to plan accordingly. If they're not, they need to know and make appropriate adjustments. This last bullet, flexibility for a rapidly changing landscape, I'm going to dive into next on this next slide. Next slide, please. So I think this is one of the big points that I want to make sure that our board and our community understand the challenge that we're dealing with in the planning for the upcoming school year. In the past, the constant, that blue line that you see there, has been the learning environment in schools. If you think about it, that means we have done business on a regular basis, face-to-face. Our entire model for schooling has been based on face-to-face interactions with our kids, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's on the field in athletics. The constant in all of it was that we're going to do business face-to-face. The variable, the black line in that, the thing that kind of waxed and waned, was the quality of education. And we all know this from experiences when our own kids had been out of school for an extended period of time. When you have students that weren't able to attend face-to-face, often that quality of a learning experience was what the variable was. What we are trying to flip to right now, and why this is such a tall task, is that we are trying to make sure that the instructional quality is the constant from here on out. So that means that no matter what the environment that a student is learning in, that it is going to be at the highest quality as possible. That the variable that we are planning for is, we don't know what could happen to us in the fall. We could be face-to-face for a little while. We could be closed for a little while. And that's just a reality that we are facing as school districts across the state and nation right now. But we are trying to make sure that the quality of the learning experience does not vary based on whether or not students are face-to-face. So this is the big shift instructionally in our system that we're continuing to work with our staff and plan for the upcoming school year. Next slide, please. So I think a lot of people are wondering, how are we going about this? Like, how are we actually getting the right information and getting input? So we, as a leadership team on a regular basis, are attending various learning experiences and have been throughout the spring. That includes webinars, conference calls, stuff like that. The next 3 days, I'm engaged in a conference with 2 of our executive leaders here in Belton ISD about high quality instruction in the fall and what that's going to look like. We're constantly reading. We're reading the news articles that everybody's peppered with, but we're also reading what our educational leaders across the nation are saying about best practices at this time. Collaboration. We are working with and reaching out to other school districts on a regular basis. That means, for example, we've had some of our HR staff working with our other local school districts leaders in the HR world, talking through with them what they're facing, what their challenges are. I reach out to other superintendents on a regular basis and pick their brains. They're all pretty smart, and I need all the help I can get. And then our job-alike groups, we have different groups that we're all a part of throughout the state. For example, Region 12 superintendents have been meeting every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And we're a part of that Region 12 superintendent collaboration. I know that our communications department, TSPRA, is the organization they're a part of, and they are talking on a regular basis as well. So we're learning through collaboration through our job-alike groups as well. Data monitoring, we're constantly looking at what Bell County is putting out regarding information on our COVID cases, on our testing, and on the DSHS website. DSHS is Department of State Health Services. That's commonly referred to as DSHS. We're looking at all of that data. As you all probably know, I think we jumped up another 40 or so active cases in Bell County earlier today, and unfortunately had another fatality recently as well. Our cases, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, are in the high 500s now and close to 600. Obviously, those aren't all active cases. We do have a big chunk of recovered cases, but the truth is our data is showing us that the number of cases in Bell County is continuing to increase. We are also gathering information from our community. Thought Exchange, as you know, was put out there, and I'm going to have in just a minute our technology team show you a little bit about what our community has said regarding planning for next year. And then other feedback avenues, as you all, I'm sure, are also getting. I get stopped on a regular basis when I see people and have people give me thoughts and ask questions. We receive emails, and we're gathering all of that information, trying to make good decisions. And then last, obviously, that guidance that I referred to earlier. If you would, click on that Thought Exchange for me now so I can show our board and our community a little bit about what the feedback has been. So as you see, there we go. So as you can see, we had 1,111 participants give us input on what we should keep in mind for the upcoming school years. We plan to safely return back to school. That means that they shared 968 individual thoughts and rated those thoughts 42,070 times. So it's a big body of data. If you would, click on that view button where it says top thoughts. Right there, perfect. So as you can see, these are the top thoughts that our community said. So out of all of the thoughts in the ratings, these are the ones that were rated the highest in all of this. So you see things like keep sanitizer stations available and soap available for kids. You see hand sanitizer again. You see breaks and making sure kids can have fresh air. You see hand washing. So you see a lot of safety things, but then you start to see things like class sizes and how are you going to manage through all of these, the guidance that's out there. Communication is a key thing that has come through in all of this. So as you scroll through this report, you're all welcome to see what actually the community has said and what those top thoughts has been or have been along the way. Jamie, will you go back a slide for me? Perfect. And I put that link in there specifically for you as a board and also for our community to see. I think it's important for us to be transparent and say, here were the thoughts that were on the community's mind. I would say a couple of big things that came to me when I looked through the data, and we're continuing to use this data in our planning process, were the idea of safety protocols and sanitary conditions, right? The hand washing, the making sure when we're back face to face that we're providing guidance for people and holding people accountable to being safe. The second is, it came out kind of loud and clear that we shouldn't focus a ton on state testing, that there are a lot more important things that we need to do other than focus on state testing. And then the third is that there's going to be training and support and communication that's really needed for all groups along the way. As you click on that, and I would encourage you all just to take a look at that whenever you have some time, dive into some of those things. And we're using this feedback for our planning purposes, but I also think it gives you as a board really good insight into what the community is saying regarding our planning efforts for the upcoming year. Next slide. So really getting into how we're using all of this information and all of these inputs now. So what we're starting with is the knowns and the unknowns of the situation at hand. First, the known that we have, school is planned on starting August 19th, and we don't have any intention of changing that. And I want to be really clear with our community and with our board on that one now. I know that there's a lot of discussion about different school calendars and different start times and stuff. As of right now, our goal is to make sure that we have a learning experience starting for kids on August the 19th. We know that learning is going to happen for our kids. We're proud to say that it happened throughout the spring, but we also know that learning is going to happen at different levels, hopefully for our kids this fall. Staff will be needed. It's not like we're not going to need staff to do all this. In fact, I can tell you that the shift in learning right now, if we were to go all online or some kind of blended approach, we need staff to be able to do it. So staff, I need you to hear loud and clear. We aren't anticipating having you go anywhere. We need your help and your leadership along the way. Health concerns will be a topic. So this is heavy on the mind, as you can see from our community, but this is going to be talked about all summer long in all of the news media, and all of our elected officials will be talking about what the actual concerns are in front of us as we open school in the fall. And that it'll probably weigh heavy on a lot of parents' minds as well. They want to know that their students are going to be safe coming to school. Safety and sanitation is important, obviously. And then that second to last bullet on the knowns is one that I really want to point out. We are going to get varying opinions as a school district. And it's loud and clear in the data that I provided you in the thought exchange. There are some that are saying, I'm not going to send my kid to school no matter what. And there are others that are saying, I'm sending my kid to school and you're not going to have them wear a face mask. And so there, you have polar opposite feedback. And in a community this large, in a district this large, we are going to have varying opinions. Our job, I believe, in all of this is to make sure that we are, again, focused on those things that I talked about earlier, the values that are important to Belton ISD, the safety and health of our kids, and that creating exceptional learning experiences for everyone. The unknowns that we have right now are kind of big ones. We don't have clear safety guidance. We don't have that right now. We have recommendations from the CDC. They updated them May the 19th, I believe was the last time that they updated them. But that is the most recent safety guidance we have for reopening schools. And a lot of that was talking about social distancing and how far to keep students apart and what those recommendations would be for the classrooms as we reopen. I don't know the readiness for change and flexibility that we have amongst our staff and the community. There is a lot of change that is happening, and I really feel for our staff and community because it's a challenging situation to be put in. But I can't say how ready everyone is for this changing landscape that we're about to experience this fall. We don't know some of the logistics along the way, and I'll use transportation as an example in this one. Without that safety guidance that we have, I can't answer what transportation is going to look like yet right now for our kids on their way to school. And just the simple fact of we have some guidance that's telling us you can only have a certain number of kids per bus. Well, when we plan on 50 kids a bus and we're only allowed to bring 13, that is going to substantially change the way we might transport our kids. And then lastly, the unknowns. As you all know, this has been evolving rapidly. It changes on a regular basis, and I'm going to use UIL guidance as the most recent change. So if you all didn't notice, we rolled out a plan, I think it was June the 8th, and got kids going with the current UIL guidance at the time. And it was about 3 days later that that guidance changed again. And so I can't answer for people what that guidance is going to be regarding COVID-19 nor the status of the pandemic throughout our nation, but we know that it will impact us in some way, shape, or form. Next slide. So next slide, please. So by going through those knowns and unknowns, what we're trying to do now is really dive into the scenarios. And we really see, and I think Dr. Kraft over in Killeen talked about this. I know the Dallas ISD superintendent talked about this recently. I really believe most districts across the state are talking about similar scenarios to this. We see things in 3 different ways right now. First, school can open face-to-face and we don't have restrictions. We all want that. I want to see our kids and our teachers in the classroom being able to have a healthy, safe, supportive environment because we do great things when we can see our kids face-to-face. Scenario 2 is we're opening and we can do face-to-face, but there's going to be restrictions in health guidance that we really need to adhere to. Most likely, that is a very real possibility for us in Belton ISD and throughout the state right now. And then scenario 3, we can't open face-to-face and it's virtual instruction again, similar to what it was this spring. So our job as a leadership team is to start to go through, and I provided a couple examples there, those scenarios and start to plan for all of those different scenarios as a school district. So as you see scenario 1, you can see no change in our normal business of transportation, no change in our normal business of school lunches, no change in the idea of access to technology. But where it gets real challenging is where the COVID implications really start to ramp up in scenarios 2 and 3. And those are looking at transportation and school lunches. How do we actually, using the guidance that we have from the health departments or from TEA, how do we actually go through our operational functions as a school district like these things? And then finally at the end, that idea of just having to live in the virtual environment again for a little while. A couple of things that I'll point out about this. I would love to see scenario one be exactly what we experienced. I think the reality of the situation probably puts us in a planning effort that realizes we could be face-to-face some, but we will have groups of students who are virtual in their education in the fall. Whether it's parents who are refusing to send their kids to school, or let's say, for example, you open a school and you realize that an employee has tested positive for COVID. We're going to be faced with challenges at that point about what we do with students and how we navigate through those situations. So I think that's the reality that we're all facing. I do know, I did not hear him speak, but I do know one of the publicized quotes from our commissioner last week as he was attending the TASA virtual conference that they put on was that we are going to experience a blended learning environment in the fall. And I think that that's the reality that we're planning for. How blended that is, I think is what is kind of up in the air right now. That last one, technology access, is one that I want to point out on because it's on our agenda a little bit later tonight. And that's in all of this, we have been racking our brains as a leadership team on how can we do school in a virtual way without increasing the density of devices. And we haven't been able to figure out a way that we actually can, meaning that technology is kind of like the pen and paper that we need to be able to do things for kids, great things for kids, if we end up in virtual learning environments. So I wanted to point that out because we've spent a lot of time as a leadership team trying to figure out what we need to do to make sure every student and family has access to technology to make sure that their learning experience is great if we do have some kind of virtual closure coming up. Next slide. After we go through all of those scenarios, what we're doing is we're going to look for all of those themes across the scenarios, and we're going to be able to set the priorities that we have in this. So example, if we see something that pops up in all three scenarios that we need to do and take action on, we put that toward the top of our priority list. We know that no matter what the scenario is that we're planning for, this will be an action item moving forward. Again, I'll use the technology piece as a key example of that. We were racking our brains on all of this, trying to figure out how do we do this well, and we can't figure out a way not using technology to do some of that well. So hence the reason that's on the agenda later tonight. We're going to continue to gain multiple perspectives. As I said, we're attending a conference this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Dr. Lovesmith, Dr. Golden, and I are all attending a conference on what virtual learning or learning in the age of COVID should look like regarding instructional continuity. And we'll continue to gain multiple perspectives. We are talking through how we actually get additional staff input. We've obviously done the thought exchange, and we've had some staff weigh in on those things, but we want to be really targeted with our staff and gain their input. We want to gain the input from our board of trustees and our community on this as well. We'll continue to work on the action steps. So I think it's Wednesday morning this week. Our COVID leadership team is going to be getting together and talking about exactly what those action steps are, and then set a timeline for critical decisions moving forward. After we get to those critical decisions, communicate effectively with our community and be open and honest with everyone, but try and give them as clear and concrete information as we possibly can. Next slide. So a couple of communication points that I want to stress for the community at this point right now is where we are in this process. First, planning continues and will continue all through the summer. I wish I could tell you that I had a plan right now what August 19th will look like, but I can't, and here's why. Tomorrow we're expecting additional information from our commissioner, who has said that he will give us guidance regarding what the school potential school openings could look like in the fall. That type of information I think is great. I'm looking forward to that, and we will use that for our planning purposes. I imagine though, based on how fluid the situation has been in the last 8 weeks, that information will change again over the next month as we continue to plan. So I just want to make sure our community knows and understands we are putting our best foot forward in all of our planning efforts right now. And I hope that they understand that the ball game changes on a regular basis on us. Secondly, school calendar. We are not, as an administration, recommending any changes to the school calendar at this time, meaning August 19th is our planned first day of school, and we are not planning on substantially changing the calendar and putting additional weeks in there as some districts are doing. Here is why. Given the fact that we can't predict what this is going to look like, it seems like it would be premature to jump to our community and say, we're going to make changes to the school calendar that the board approved back in January and disrupt your learning environment, your work environment at home based on our gut feeling. If we need to add additional days or weeks, I would bring to the board and talk about that at the end of the school year, but not in the middle of the school year at this point. Again, if we're able to do this well, my hope is that we're going to be able to provide instruction in a constant level from day one, whether it's face-to-face or virtual, that even if we are closed, we don't have to add additional days. That's the hope in all of this. But I do want to point out, if we have to talk about additional days for some reason, that we would talk about adding them on toward the end of the year. Third, we want to see students face-to-face, and I need our community to hear that. Our plan is to try and make sure that we are bringing people back face-to-face. I also need you to know that I think I would be remiss as a superintendent if we didn't plan for multiple situations coming up. And that means that I have to make sure that we are well-staffed, well-resourced, and ready for whatever the environment looks like come August 19th. Timing on all of this. We are hoping to have additional communication to our constituents here in Belton ISD here in early July, meaning I want to have something as concrete as I can possibly give at that point. We're hopeful that that guidance that we receive tomorrow will allow us to create some of that, those plans, but that's our target right now, and we will keep our community apprised along the way. And finally, that idea of stability, I understand the implications that families are feeling in all of this. Schools are at the heart of communities and are at the heart of the work environments for families, and we don't take these decisions lightly at all. I need our community to know and understand that we're going to create the most stable plan possible for our kids because they deserve it and we're focused on their learning, but also for our families because if we're disrupting their learning and their home environment on a regular basis, we know that's not good for anyone that we serve. Next slide. And I want to take some time and really dive in, and I'd encourage y'all, if you want me to go back to slides and dive into something in more depth and talk about it more, let's have the good dialogue along the way. But I'm very interested in your thoughts as trustees. What are the things that you want us to consider? What advice do you have as we're creating all of these plans for the upcoming school year?
The board have input at this point?
Yeah, I've got a couple of different questions, Matt, and you know, pick which one you want to answer first. But one is, since you sent out that link for that very lengthy TEA guideline, and I went through you know, as much of it as I could in detail until I got a headache and had to take a nap because it's really, really a lot. It's a lot to take in. So, and I also know that our team and our administrative team is very brilliant. And so I'm curious what you've already been doing in regard to looking that over and how you're pushing that out to principals and already beginning that conversation of how that would look in a class and in a school and in a day. Are you already going to that detail to kind of talk about day one in the fall? And then second part of the question is, as we get closer, would it be good to potentially take a survey of our parents to see how many of them are willing to come to school, or how many of them think that they still aren't going to be willing to do that? And that might help us in the planning with our numbers for fall.
Yeah, a couple of things. So going back to your question first about what we've gotten into. So we've gotten into the scenarios that you're talking about, and we're talking through those scenarios. Here's what I would say on that is the document that you are referring to, just so our community knows, I think it was updated June the 9th, if I'm not mistaken, by TEA. The initial guidance was that you couldn't have more than 11 people in a classroom, according to TEA guidance, if you were doing face-to-face summer school. And they said, in our conference calls, they said, that's as close to the information that you're going to get as a school district for the fall right now, so start to use that as guidance. Well, on June the 9th, that changed and went up to 22. I think it's 22, might be 23, and went up to 2022. And so we're taking a look through that based on our timing and all of this. I'm very thankful that we're not face-to-face for our summer school right now, because again, this is a perfect example of how things change pretty rapidly. But again, tomorrow, we're anticipating that that guidance is going to change on us once again, and when the commissioner gives us additional information for the fall. So our job has been to really start to think through these scenarios and plan through those things, and then try and take whatever the current guidance is and apply it to it. So yes, our transportation team is trying to figure out what do we plan for, and I wish I could give them more concrete information. We're hopeful that tomorrow gives us that. But right now we have a lot of unknowns that we're working through. And as we continue to work through those scenarios as a leadership team, you know, it varies a lot. I'll give you a couple concrete examples. So if we actually have to stick to face-to-face instruction that was only 11 students, which was our guidance prior to June the 9th, we were talking specifically about what would happen if we had to have our middle school and high school students maintain a virtual environment while our elementary students used the physical buildings of our middle schools and high schools to space out. But then that you get into staffing implications, and how do you have enough staff to actually cover all of those students face to face? And how do you make sure that people are appropriately qualified and certified to do the teaching for those students? So we talked through it, things with HR, and I know some school districts are taking a look at all of the certifications that all of the educators they employ have, and figuring out how to possibly be flexible for them. So I hope that gives you a picture of, there are a lot of scenarios that we are diving deep into, and a lot of variables that we keep trying to hash out. And we will continue to use the guidance along the way. I'm hesitant to share too much with everybody right now, because I don't want it to be stated, hey, here's what Belton ISD is going to do. We really have to wait for some of the guidance that we're expecting from the commissioner tomorrow. Regarding the survey idea, that was our initial thought with the thought exchange, is to really get a pulse of the community and see what people are feeling. I imagine that we're probably going to need to do that again coming up. We've been using other pieces of information as well along the way. Example is how we plan for students and their technology access. So we know that we have a certain percentage of our students on free and reduced lunch in our school district, and some of those students have access to technology and some of them don't. Diving into that question with our community is probably an important one for us as we plan that instructional model, but we didn't want to jump the gun and get a survey out too soon, because we don't know exactly what we need to ask at this point. We do believe that we are probably going to need to get additional feedback from our community. I don't know whether that'll be in a thought exchange or in a survey. Surveys are great sometimes, but you also get in the habit of only asking certain questions and not getting the full picture of things, where thought exchange kind of gives you more ideas and more innovative ideas sometimes, but we might couple the thought exchange that we already have with a survey coming up in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. You know, I was just thinking like the high school, for instance, you know, those crowded hallways, the way it used to be, and those kids rushing to get to class with social distancing having to be the new norm. Would we relax those times that, you know, would we give them some more time to get there just so that we can enforce the social distancing between classes? You know, and I know that's probably too granular, but just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think that, so a couple of things that have been tossed out there on things like that already is, one, it's a good thing that we're opening up a second high school at this point, and we have the ability to, I don't want to say uncrowd the hallways, because the students at Belton High School will probably say, hey, they're still crowded, but to alleviate some of the overcrowding, I guess is the best way to put it at Belton High School. But also we would have to think through how to create a rolling schedule where not all students are having passing periods at the same time. And so we might have students that are starting their day earlier and ending earlier. And then another wave of students comes in, and another wave of students comes in. And so you don't have as many students all at one time in the hallways or in the cafeterias or common areas, but you have a rolling schedule that we would have to work through with kids. There are a whole host of logistics and all of that. If you think about that from a transportation perspective, how do you get kids to school in a rolling schedule format at all 3 levels. I really believe that we will probably see more guidance. This is a belief. This isn't fact, and I want to be clear about this. I believe that we'll see more guidance from the state saying that it's imperative that we get our elementary students face-to-face, and that our secondary students are going to have to be in a more blended or virtual world. But I think I'll have to wait and see how this progresses throughout the summer.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Taggart.
Hey, Matt, first of all, just thank you guys so much. I know what it's like. I do shoot sporting clays and skeet, and there's a game called Wobble Trap where the machine's moving around and you never know where it's going to let the thing go, and it's like hitting a moving target. It's what you guys are doing, like shooting Wobble Trap. And I appreciate the laser focus that you guys have and the broad focus that you have at the same time, because we really don't know. But I'm not a doctor or anything, but from what I understand, this next month leading up to about the middle of July, because now we're in this rollback phase, the doctors are going to have a chance to get better models, to get a better understanding of what it means when we see these numbers of 40-something people get the sickness. Really, what does that mean? We'll get to crunch those numbers, and I really think we're going to have a better idea in the middle of July as to what it's going to look like. So I don't, we probably shouldn't really be worried asking too many questions now, because it's really going to look so much different a month from now, because we're going to understand a little bit more about what it's going to look like with the rollback kind of situation. But you guys are on point and doing a good job, and I appreciate how y'all are communicating this stuff with our stakeholders and the parents and everybody. They just need to hear something, and y'all have done a good job of doing that. So thank y'all very much.
I appreciate you pointing that out. I hadn't heard that. I shot skeet a few times in my life, but I hadn't heard that. So I think that's a pretty accurate representation of what we're faced with right now. And I appreciate you pointing out too, we're doing our best to try and make sure we're getting communication out, but also that everybody understands we have to see how things unfold over the next month. And I wish I had a different answer than that right now, but that's the truth of where we are. And I don't want to hide that truth from anyone.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else?
Yeah, Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Do we have, I guess this is a two-part question. One, do we have the staff to daily clean what's going to need to be done in the campuses, given it's a new parameter? And then more importantly, the scenario where we do have a student and or teacher, someone in that campus tests positive, are we prepared internally, or is that a third party that we're going to have to bring in to do a cleaning at that point? What does that look like?
So right now what we talked about is possibly having a third party come in. But again, so some of the guidance that's changed along the way is the length of time that the virus can actually live on surfaces. And so do we have staff that can do this? And have they been working with Charlotte Smith and our health services staff? Yes, I do believe we do. I think we're going to have to get to a standardized set of protocols so that we're able to do that in the building on a regular basis so that everybody knows what exactly is going to be cleaned when. I think everybody has known, I think HEB has done a really good job of managing through this virus in their stores. And I think one of the things they did the best was they said, here's what we're doing. Here are the physical things that you can see when you walk into HEB that we're doing, and trying to make sure that the public knows and understands that. I think the same type of approach has to be done for Belton ISD. We have to be able to say to our community, here's how we're going to clean, here's why we're making that decision, and then move forward from there. Regarding if somebody tests positive and what we would have to do, at this point, I think that we could probably handle it internally. But with that caveat that I can't tell you how big that challenge is going to be. There might be, if we have 2 or 3 schools that are all shut down at the same time for something like this, we might have to bring in additional help along the way. And that's part of the stuff that Mike and Robert and our leadership team are really working through. But there are a lot of variables to consider in that. I do know we get contacted by vendors on a daily basis offering their services for all sorts of cleaning and protective gear, things like that, protective equipment for schools. And we're sifting through all of that as prudently as we possibly can so that we have the right next steps if needed.
Okay, thank you.
It's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Not a question per se, but I think maybe a reiteration of what we're seeing from the surveys. If I were to kind of boil down the feedback and concerns that I'm hearing specifically, right, I'm hearing questions about the calendar, right, and it sounds like, we've already talked about that earlier here and what that looks like. I'm hearing questions about the quality of the education. We got through the end of last year, but that's not how we want to go into next year. And so, I love the graphic and kind of the talk through of the sine curve there and what that looks like, and trying to keep the educational quality the constant, right? That's been a huge piece of feedback. Third being, how would we actually pull off being remote, right? And it sounds like we're going to talk about that a little bit more. That's still TBD. What about masks? Are we going to do masks or we're not going to do masks, right? And let's not get into that right now, right? But and then the fifth one, what happens if somebody tests positive, whether it's a student somebody or a staff somebody, right? So if I kind of boil everything I'm hearing down to 5 things, those are probably the things that I'm hearing the most.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate description. Again, I'll refer to a couple other superintendents across the state. I do know, a lot of these things have been discussed in a lot of board meetings in the last couple of weeks, and I think everybody's in the same spot. We want to make sure that kids are safe if they're face-to-face with us, but we need the right guidance to do so. And we're doing our best to plan along the way. I want to go back to that instructional quality piece. One of the hopes that we have, and I don't know if we can pull it off yet, and I mean that respectfully, there's the amount of change that people are faced with is daunting in all of this. But one of the hopes that we have is if we're able to provide the right resources, learning experiences for the adults in all of the system, and stability for all of the adults in the system, that whether kids are face-to-face or virtual, we're able to provide a constant level of learning. So say, for example, I'm a student in an elementary school that goes to school for 2 weeks, then I want to be able to say, if they have to shut down because of what Jeff mentioned, somebody testing positive, and we have to shut the building down for X amount of days, that their learning can continue without skipping a beat at home if they have to be at home. And I know that's a daunting task for everyone, but that's the challenge that we've kind of thrown out to everybody too. So that's what we're trying to work through.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say, special thank you to all the CNI folks and everybody that's working on curriculum, because, if you're going to deliver remotely, you design that classwork and that course differently, right, than you're going to do it live. And we're in the situation where we kind of have to do both. So it's a heavy lift. Absolutely get it. Yeah.
Real quick, Matt, on that piece more specifically, and I don't know if you want to talk about even just thoughts that you, Deanna, everybody has looked at in regard to, is it going to, I don't feel like it's going to be, what I've heard is it's not going to be the teacher teaching a full-time in-person class and having to do remote learning at the same time. So what are your thoughts surrounding how that process would work?
Yeah, so a lot of the terms that are out there, this idea of synchronous versus asynchronous learning, the idea of students having to be face-to-face learning from the teacher at all times versus learning kind of parallel on their own. And I think that we're going to have to see some form of direct instruction from the teachers. And that could be video recorded lessons. It could be a small amount of time for like mini lessons, but then some asynchronous work where the student is working on their own side by side in diving deeper into those topics. A lot of those, you heard some of this maybe a decade ago now when you heard about flipped classrooms and the idea of people recording lessons and being a coach for students while students watch the video of the recordings at home and they're doing more of the work through that learning experience face-to-face with the instructor. I see more of that type of an experience where we have these mini lessons where people would have to be face-to-face and provide some direct guidance with kids. And it might be on a Zoom like this where everybody's able to answer questions, but then it's more of a coaching role for the staff along the way, and while students are continuing to deepen their learning individually. I think that's where it gets really tricky though, because what we know is we have students that are able to own their learning more and be more more independent in their learning. as they get older. It becomes really tricky at the elementary level when you start talking about elementary students and the idea of asynchronous learning and what burden that places on families in being able to work through that. So I know Deanna, like I said, Deanna, Melinda, and I are all continuing to go through this learning experience about what high quality instructional continuity should look like. And we'll continue to provide the best recommendations forward, but really see probably a more of a blended learning environment than we ever have in the past.
Matt, can I ask a specific question? It may be too granular, as Suzanne said earlier, but I think about our bilingual population, and I know the district does a good job of communicating in both English and in Spanish, but I worry about the comfort level of being able to communicate on thought exchange or even feeling comfortable making the voice heard. Do we have a special communication plan to work with those families? And then I guess secondly, if we're going to have a flipped classroom, are we going to have bilingual flipped classrooms as well?
Yeah, and I got to be careful not to use the idea of flipped classrooms. I don't want to lock people into a box. It was just an example. Two things on that one. Yes, on the how we are communicating with our families who speak other languages, we do have plans on that, but I think we always have room for improvement on that. And so we will continue to work through that. And I appreciate you bringing that up. What we do know is we typically, for students that speak another language in their home, we have lower participation, whether it's in thought exchange or in surveys, than we do other families. And so we will continue to figure out how to best reach them and gather their feedback along the way on this. You mentioned the idea of them feeling safe and the ability to actually share their thoughts along the way. And so in the absence of face-to-face meetings and pulling those groups together with translators, we'll continue to work the best that we can to make sure we are reaching them. And that's probably going to take a lot of great minds. So I appreciate you bringing that up. We can get better in that area. Secondly, regarding that, I appreciate you bringing up our special populations of students. And when I talk about that, I talk about our English learners or our students receiving special education services in our district. I think it's going to be really important for us to also talk about how we serve them, and we might need to serve them face-to-face in our district as well, meaning that we might not have the capabilities to produce some of those things virtually that we have to be able to produce face-to-face. And so as we're going through those plannings, I know a lot of school districts have talked a little bit about elementary being face-to-face, students with special needs being face-to-face, and English learners being face-to-face. But again, you have to create the environment and the safety protocols where the families feel comfortable sending them face-to-face as well. So we'll keep working through that. I wish I had a more concrete answer for you, but what you mentioned is a big challenge for us right
now. I'm sorry, go ahead, Janet.
Just one last thing. Some of this reminds me of homebound in a way. And I had a homebound teacher before I went to high school. I had a terrible injury on a trampoline before I went to high school, missed the first 6 weeks of my freshman year, had a homebound teacher come and give me my instruction. And it was just directly from the classroom to me. And I don't know if in some ways that's kind of the model we're looking at is, they're delivering straight from the classroom.
I think that's a really interesting comparison there, because my mother served as a homebound teacher for a while too. She was a elementary school teacher for 36 years, and she also served as a homebound teacher for some students that were out for an extended time. I think the challenge with that is the homebound instruction might look a little bit different now through a virtual world, because one of the other things that we have to do is protect our staff safety in all of this too. So I can't send staff out to homes to instruct face-to-face. So our job is to try and figure out how to create some of that in a virtual world and also allow our staff to be able to work through that. So when you brought up earlier about the models, the different models we're thinking through, I think you're right on target. We're trying to rack our brains, and we'll be reaching out to our staff to rack their brain on how we can pull some of this off. So that idea of personalized or individualized instruction for kids is really probably where we need to go, and it's just a matter of how we can get there.
Anyone else? That was some great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Smith, and board for your input as well. If there's nothing further, Dr. Smith, we'll move on to the next item. That's going to be Mr. Manuel Alcozer is going to give us a policy committee report, followed by Mr. Ty Taggart with the facilities committee report.
Thank you, Madam President. Couple of items that we discussed dealing with two local policies, EIC local, which kind of surfaces again. We've had probably, if you recall, EIC local is the grade point average policy that we had a long discussion about earlier in the year, and passed a resolution regarding the pass-fail situation and how we're going to calculate GPAs for the end of the school year. The second policy that we discussed was Coach Skidmore came and gave us a presentation on FFAA local, which deals with pre-participation physicals and how we as a district deal with that and what the UL recommendation was with respect to that. Before I talk about that, let's go back to EIC local. It's on our agenda later on this evening. I believe it's item 8. Dr. Lovesmith is going to come talk to us about that tonight. And let me just make a couple of comments about EIC local. If you recall back when we had the long discussion about what we were going to do in terms of adopting a policy regarding pass-fail, not pass-fail, and whatnot, one of the items that came up in support of the decision that was made by us as a board was to provide students and parents with notice as to how GPAs are going to be calculated every year, especially for seniors and then juniors as they go into applying for colleges and so forth. Well, one of the items that we thought we would add after that long discussion was to give the public, to give students and parents notice that we could come up in the future and have to make a decision like that, like we did before. And I believe it's on page 136 of Dr. Lovesmith's presentation, or at least in our packets on page 136. What we decided was to add just one small sentence in there that basically gives the public notice that in the event an unforeseen circumstance takes place, an unforeseen closure of schools takes place, then we're going to have to address this policy again. Of course, we do have the authority to do that. Dr. Lovesmith did communicate with TASB's legal counsel and asked them, hey, what happens if we come in and address this in a very particular fashion? TASB said, well, because there's so many variables, so many things that could happen, you probably shouldn't do that. But because of our discussion, we thought we would add something that's going to be very generic in that we're just going to give the public notice that if something like this happens again, that we're going to exercise our authority and pass a resolution at that time based upon what's going on. Because there's so many variables to deal with. And she'll point that out as she goes through her presentation this evening. Another thing, we kind of got off track a little bit during our discussions. We started talking about, well, what about valedictorian for, do we need a valedictorian for a New Tech and Belton High School since they're both combined? But we decided that we would table that until we have a graduate profile. I think Dr. Smith had indicated that during the meeting, so we're gonna table that. So I'm just saying that that may come up later. Perhaps in the year, it's going to come up maybe next year, but we're going to have to address that at some point during our discussions for the future. The other thing that we discussed was this OnRamp. I didn't know anything about that until Dr. Lovesmith came and spoke to us about that. It's a really neat program. It has to do with dual credit, and if you look in your packet, she did add the OnRamp language in the policy. OnRamp, as I understand it, basically allows a student to engage in dual credit through the University of Texas. I think we're going to start with pre-calculus, if I recall correctly. And the neat thing about OnRamp is that a student can decide whether they want that on their transcript or not. Okay, so if a student takes the course and says, well, I don't really want that on my transcript for college, then they can elect to take it off of that, but they still get the credit if they sat through the course. And I believe it's $100 or so. It's not real expensive, but it does allow some leeway for students to decide whether they want it on the transcript or not, which is a great thing. It's a great option for them. So since we're starting that program with University of Texas, we had to add that in our EIC local. And she may discuss that in more detail when she comes with her presentation this evening. The second thing that we discussed having to deal with FFAA local. Here in our district, we require students that are going to participate, for example, in athletics and band, to have a pre-participation physical every year. Those physicals are offered during the spring. Of course, with everything we've been going through, those physicals did not take place this spring, and they're free physicals for students that participate in BISD athletics and in band. Now, the UIL Medical Advisory Committee met, and they decided, because UIL only requires physicals for the first and third year of participation in athletics and band for high school students, and then those entering junior or middle school to have a pre-participation physical. In our EIC local, we require that every year, not just the first and third, for example, in high school, we require that every year. So Coach Skidmore said, well, why don't we waive that requirement for this year? Since the UIL's doing that, why don't we do that? But at the same time, for the safety of our students, they still have to fill out a medical history form. And if there's anything in there that needs to be explored later, then they would be required to have a physical before they participate in athletics. So we thought it made sense to go ahead and waive that requirement for this year to go in line with what the UIL is doing. And essentially, that's what we discussed in our meeting. Any questions or comments?
Very good report. Thank you, sir.
Chris, Rosie,
Do you have any
anything?
questions? Nope.
Okay.
Seeing no takers, thank you. That's very informative. Mr. Taggart?
Okay, first of all, I just want to tell you guys that our next facilities meeting, which I think is it Wednesday, Matt, is that right?
Yes, sir.
We are going to have the opportunity to go tour our new high school. So, and everybody, the 7 board members are invited, if I'm understanding that correctly. And we'll follow all the protocols, you know, whatever with that stuff. And, but I'm excited to be able to go back out there and see. We got furniture out there, office furniture, room furniture. I mean, we're about a month away from taking ownership of that thing. But I'm not going to say anything else about it because the guys are going to give their report later. So I don't want to steal their thunder on our deal. So really what we're starting to focus on in our facilities meeting is our long range focus. Because if you remember right, we are 3 years removed from our last bond issue, already 3 years. We've already been in one of our elementaries for a full year. And we kind of, when we were doing that demographic stuff, we kind of know about every 5 years, we got to really look hard at more elementaries with the growth rates that we're having. So we're really going to have to start honing in on a game plan and dollar amounts for another bond coming up. And, you know, obviously with the current financial situation and things, there's still some unanswered variables out there. We don't know how quickly our economy is going to bounce back. There's some variables there. I've seen some really positive models and I've seen some that aren't, but that's kind of how that thing works. But that's really what we're starting to really drill down on. We are going to have money left over from our bond investments. While we borrow that money, we don't just spend it all at one time. We invest it in our Jennifer and her team, as well as our bond company that we hire. They're very have done an outstanding job, and we're going to have several $1 million of money left there from those really good sound investments to start knocking some of these short-term things off of the list. So we in the next couple meetings, we really need to make some decisions on some short-term goals and start moving some of that money, because I personally feel like we are responsible for spending as much as we can responsibly, keeping that 25, that 2.5 to 3 month spending their money. But I feel like we don't just need to take all the stakeholders' money and stick it in the bank. We need to spend it. So I think that's something we really have to start drilling down on and moving forward. A couple things that are really at the top of the list because the need are going to be swim center. That's got to be a huge focus, short term and long term, because we got to fix it short term before we can start talking long term. And then CTE, as we all know, we're so proud of our CTE program in Belton, and we have at Belton High School, we're going to have some needs to increase the capabilities of several of those programs at Belton High School. So those are a couple of things that we really talked quite a bit about. And then they started giving us demographer numbers, and I think we're going to have a little bit of a drop because of the shutdown. But I think then next year, what I'm hearing in my industry, which is construction, is we're going to have a big bounce back in housing and things. So I think those numbers will come back out and balance out over a 2-year span. But that's really the things that we've been discussing. We really have to get our short-term goals in concrete. What are we going to spend? What are we going to spend it on? And we really have to start formulating a plan for the next bond and when that's going to be. And that's really the meeting in a nutshell there.
Thanks, Ty. Does the board have any discussion about that? Just appreciate your report. So excited about the new high school. That's exciting. Exciting to see the furniture and all the things on Wednesday. So thank you, Ty. So we're going to move on to the other part of our agenda items. I just wanted to remind the board that as we take action on things, please raise your hand so it's nice and visible if you're voting, when you're voting. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Does any board member wish to have any item pulled for further discussion? Mr. Floor.
So I don't want to pull one, but can I ask a brief question on one? So particularly about the Central County Services, do we know if that's a new agreement or if that's renewal? I wasn't familiar with that one before I read this.
Okay, Dr. Smith, or
I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Lovesmith. I think she can jump in on that one.
okay.
Yes, that's actually run by Jennifer Amirs, and it is a renewal. We've used them for several years now.
Okay. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve as presented? Mr. Taggart, is there a second? Mr. Norwood, all in favor, please raise your hand. See all those palms? That passes unanimously. So we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Okay. So we are now going to talk about Superintendent's report. Dr. Smith.
I was muted. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We're going to keep this one a little shorter than our last one. Next slide, if you would, please. As you all know, I've been presenting to you regarding my entry plan or investment plan, as I've called it, into Belton ISD over the past few months. I have now eclipsed the 100-day mark, and that's not work days, that's just total days in Belton ISD. And so tonight I'm going to report just a little bit beyond the actions that I've reported on in the past and into a couple of the things that I found in next steps. Next slide. So as you know, these were the 5 goals that I had in coming into Belton ISD, to make sure I really focused on what the students were experiencing, to make sure that we were developing a sound partnership between the superintendent and the board of trustees, to make sure that we were listening to the community well, to develop the team and to learn with the team, and also to ensure an effective transition. Next slide. So my reflections on those things over the past 100 days are as follows. First of all, goal 1, the focus on student experiences. And I think, honestly, COVID added to this for me. I've always felt like the student experience in learning and in schools goes far beyond the 4 classroom walls. And I believe that wholeheartedly. This COVID experience, I think, has sent that message loud and clear through our community. We do great things in Belton ISD in the classrooms, But the student experience is beyond just what students experience sitting in a desk. Their involvement in extracurricular activities, those CTE experiences, the student-led groups that we have in our schools, all of those work together to create a memorable and impactful student experience in Belton ISD that is loud and clear and something to be extremely proud of. Second thing, the board partnership. I believe we're developing a real positive working relationship despite COVID. It has been weird, and I think I've said that to you all various times. It's just been strange that we haven't been able to be face-to-face a lot of this time, but I'm very thankful for the learning experiences and the dialogue that we've had along the way. The community engagement piece, this is one of those areas that it's hard for me to have a pulse on right now. I believe that we've done a lot of communicating to our community, and we've done a lot of asking the community for their input through thought exchange. But as far as in that goal, we talked about sitting down face-to-face, having dialogue about where we're going as a school district for the future and what kind of innovative ideas that our community might have. We have more work to do there, and we weren't able to accomplish some of that in these first 100 days. Goal 4 was on team development, and COVID did impact us in that as well. We had to be reactive because we had a different circumstance that we originally planned on. But throughout all of this, we have worked hard to, whether it's through our principal meetings or our cabinet meetings, to really start to dive into learning together and to make sure that our focus isn't just on, okay, what do we do now that we have new guidance, but how do we change the way we do business in Belton ISD to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids despite the circumstances. So we've worked hard on that team development. I'm extremely proud of our leaders in our system. And while we've had to be reactive, we are learning together, and we're trying to make sure that that focus remains the focus. And then finally, the one that I think was is the most interesting is this idea of an effective transition. I want to just applaud our leaders throughout the system and our teachers throughout the system for the work that they've done over the first 100 days that I have been here. There's a quote by Hemingway, and it's something to the effect of, the only way that you know to trust someone is by trusting them. And one of the things that was loud and clear coming in is that I had a great team from custodial staff, through our school nurses, through our teachers, through our administrative leaders at the building and at the district level, and that they have all been doing a phenomenal job to keep regular business going throughout all of this. I am proud to say that we continue to do our regular business despite all of the interruptions that we've had, and we do have a strong team in Belton ISD to be proud of. Next slide. Some findings that I had. So those were reflections, and here's kind of what I see in all of that input that I've had along the way. The feeling of community in BISD is strong in every group that I have met with, and I've met with every campus in almost all departments. One of the key things that comes up loud and clear in their feedback when I ask them, what are you proud of in Belton ISD? It's that there is a family feel here, and that we're all about doing good things for kids. And that idea of one big red community is a feeling that everybody in our system feels. The second thing is that we have a great student focus in Belton ISD. But also, when I've asked more questions along the way, even through board discussions, that we have great student focus, but we need to be able to ensure that we have a focus on each and every student and not lump people together sometimes in all. We know that sometimes we have students that experience negative interactions in our school system, and it's our job to keep working to ensure that their voices are heard and that we're addressing their needs along the way. That the idea that we're good and we're doing good things for all kids is great, but I want to get down to the heart of, I want to make sure that we're doing something exceptional for each and every kid, no matter what their circumstances are. The third one is an investment in leadership. I hear loud and clear that we have strong leaders in our system, and I feel that. But I think as a growing school district, we need to be able to be really clear about the roles of leaders and how we work in concert with each other and not against each other sometimes. And I'll say this, the idea of student leaders and campus leaders, teachers, everybody working together in unison, moving us forward is a challenge that I think we have in our system. Trust. I don't know whether this is because there's a new superintendent or whether it's just an issue that we have to address or whether it's because of COVID implications. But I do know that we need to continue to work on building trust throughout our community, through our staff, and through our students, meaning that we have to make sure that we are working through being transparent with our community as we work through change. All of this stuff through COVID is a challenge for people. The more transparent we can be, I think the better trust we can build. I wanted to make sure I emphasize this. I do not think that there is an absence of trust in the system, but I think that given the current circumstances that we are faced with, and possibly having a new superintendent in the midst of it all as well, we have to continue being focused on building trust throughout all stakeholder groups in our system. And then finally, we have work to do just to continue to grow as a school district, meaning we've gone from a small school district to a bigger school district, and we will continue to grow by every piece of information that we get so far. And we have to make sure that we're all pointed in the same direction with a clear vision for the future, but that we have the systems and the processes in place to make sure that everybody can do their jobs well. And that we also have facility investments in place so that as we grow and we have new communities keep popping up, that the communities that are more established in Belton ISD feel like we continue to maintain a focus on them and maintain their facilities and their resources, just like we would with the brand new schools as well. So these are the findings that I had based on all of this feedback that I've gotten over the first 100 days of really key areas that I think we need to continue to work on. Next slide. So how will we work on those things moving forward? I've talked to you all about strategic planning, and I did that very deliberately because I do believe it is time in Belton ISD to make sure that we're all pointed in the same direction. With the opening of a second high school, Lake Belton High School, we need to make sure that the experiences that students have in whatever feeder pattern they exist in are all pointed to one outcome at the end, meaning what we really value for our students. So we need to engage that design team, get the journey of a graduate or the graduate profile going, and really start to engage our community in this. And we're going to work on that this summer and getting that moving forward. The second one is this idea of exceptional student learning experiences. One of the things that I think is great is that we can celebrate great work done in Belton ISD in the past, but we still have great work left to do. I don't want to rest until every student around wants to come to Belton ISD and wants to be a part of something special here. Why? Because we're doing what's right for each and every student. And so that idea of what do we call it, world-class learning opportunities or exceptional or extraordinary, we want to make sure that our students are given the best outcome possible and the best experience that they possibly can have. In order to do that, we have to figure out ways to engage student voice. I think it's important for us to listen to our kids, hear what's on their mind, and hear what we can do to create those experiences. The idea of clarity in the hopes and dreams, I want to hear from parents, and that helps us in the strategic planning process as well. We need to hear from parents and our community members about what their hopes and dreams are for kids. And so that strategic planning process will help us engage in that. The third thing is an investment in staff. One of the things that I heard loud and clear is that we need to invest in a mentality of coaching and growth. What we want is we want an organization that feels the comfort in being able to take an innovative step forward in doing what's right for kids and not have a fear of having a misstep along the way. So the only way to do that is to create a culture where coaching and growing is expected from each and every level in our system, whether it's at the principal level or the teacher level or the custodial staff level. Our job has to be to create an investment in our staff as a learning organization where every member of our staff is challenged to learn and grow and be better the next day than they were the previous day. And the fourth thing is empowering leadership. We need to continue to make sure that we are developing as a leadership team. Our team of 8 development, I'm excited to move forward with the Board of Trustees on and how we continue to work together to do great things for kids. We're going to work on reorganizing our central office, and I'll be talking a little bit about about this with you all over the next month, but making sure that at the core of our work as a central office is this idea of a student experience and what we want for our students. And then the idea of that third bullet, voices beyond titles. What I mean by that is we have to figure out ways to engage all levels of our system so that they can help contribute their voices and their ideas to becoming better as a learning organization. Leadership does not reside only in titles in our system. I believe it needs to reside at every level of our system. And so over the next year, we're going to work to make sure that we create forums and opportunities for our staff to share their ideas and propel us forward and really invest in innovation. Next slide. So that is a quick overview of my first 100 days, the things that I found and the next steps that we have moving forward. I also wanted to make sure that I updated you on some COVID things. I spent a lot of time talking to you about how we're planning for the future, so I won't spend much time on that right now. But I do want to make sure we provide you some updates regarding our March 17th resolution items. As you all know, we do have some waivers that you all approved on the consent agenda just a few minutes ago. Those things, although you all gave me some authority to seek waivers without board approval, we've been doing our best to make sure that our board is approving those every time, and you're continuing to do so. I'm going to ask Ms. Land and Mr. Schiller to weigh in on the budgetary impact and the staff impact in just a second, so they can tell you a little bit about where we stand. But the budgetary items, before I turn it over to Jennifer, they've really focused on the staff pay and I lost the word for a second, premium pay that we had for our staff at the beginning of this closure. And Jennifer has an update for you as well about what we also did for our staff to make sure that they were well supported in this process regarding internet access. Jennifer.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Smith. Just briefly wanted to let you know where we stand in terms of the resolution that you approved at the beginning of this COVID period. To date, we have spent about $350,000 on what we have classified as COVID-19 expenses. Of that amount, about 80% of that has been dedicated toward payroll expenses, such as the premium pay. And a large portion of that is also the internet stipend that was paid to employees back in May to help offset the costs that are being incurred or have been incurred for providing internet access at home and working from home. And another 30% of that amount has gone toward our school nutrition department, serving meals, and again, some more premium pay in that area. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I want to applaud Jennifer on this. She worked together with Todd. The idea of providing a small amount of money for our staff that all of a sudden had to engage in remote learning and doing business from home regarding an internet stipend is one that she and Todd really put together for our staff. And I thank them for that, because I think that helped us ensure that we were able to give our students a quality learning experience throughout the spring. Todd, do you have any updates for us on the staff impact through COVID?
Yeah, in addition to what Jennifer had communicated, we are continuing to be flexible with individuals with COVID-related leave events and applying the federal leave that's been supplied by the feds. So we'll continue to do that and monitor that, and hopefully get us to the July 6th date when everybody's that's year-round is back on schedule. So we do continue to be flexible with individuals working from home and utilizing leave as part of, especially if they're experiencing the COVID-related issues or having daycare issues, which is all things that are included in that federal leave.
Thank you, Todd. Madam President, I think that concludes my superintendent's report for the month of June.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Does the board have any comments or questions about that? No, we'll move on to the next item. Dr. Smith, you're up again. We're going to talk about the goals for 2021 and take some action.
Madam President and members of the board, I will not go into a lot of depth on this one. We covered this in our workshop agenda, I think, pretty deliberately. Next slide, please. As you all know, goals help us set direction for the school district, and we view the 2021 school year is a time for us to set direction for the school district. So these goals are really about what we're about for the next year and will help provide alignment in our system and serve as the foundation for the superintendent evaluation. Next slide. So there's the timeline and development process that we have used so far. Next slide. The structure of the goals that we are talking about is this, that these goal statements that are before you tonight for approval are the big broad statements that point us in a direction. Next month, we will bring back to you key progress measures where they specifically spell out in SMART goal format where applicable, the measures that we're going to use for our progress along the way. I know as board members, you've been talked to in various trainings about your requirements for House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1566. And those measures that you are provided next month will help set specific direction and targets for our school system moving forward. Next slide. But tonight, what we are asking from you is approval of the 5 goals that are there in front of you, or if you have any revisions or suggestions that you would like to make, we are glad to entertain those at this time. And that's all I have for you.
Or did have any comments or questions, board? No, is there a motion to approve as presented? I see Mr. Norwood's hand. Is there a second? Ms. Janet Lee, all approved, please raise your hand. All in favor, excuse me. That is approved unanimously. We will move on to our next item, which is Mr. Sam Skidmore is going to talk to us about take appropriate action regarding a resolution for the suspension of FFAA local. We heard a little bit about that earlier from Manuel. Mr. Skidmore?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, board members and Dr. Smith. The UIL and their CC&R manual cover this pretty well, that they require physical every 2 years of high school, their 7th grade year, freshman year, and junior year. With our FFAA local policy, we go above that, requiring annual physical. As Mr. Alcozer stated, that we usually provide free physicals in spring. We usually have about 200 to 300 kids that come up and take advantage of our free physicals that Scott and White doctors donate their time to come do that. The Medical Advisory Committee of the UIL has passed a resolution for this upcoming school year that any kid with a pre-participation physical and has been cleared for participation in athletics or marching band would not be required to get a new physical for the upcoming year, whether they got it in 7th grade, 8th grade, or freshman year. And they did this in part to take the pressure and stress off our medical community dealing with the COVID crisis, and also try to keep kids from going into clinics as much as possible to get the physicals. They would still be required to get a medical, fill out their medical advisory sheet. And if anything, any precursors on that, we would still require them to go get a physical, whether they had history of heart-related issues, we would require them still to go get a physical, but it would alleviate a lot of pressure off our community and our medical staff.
Okay, does the board have any comments or questions about that?
Just one comment. I mean, I expect this will probably go through in a minute, but I can't emphasize enough, right, the ability of the kid to get free physicals, right, in the spring, and right, and really, like, what that gets us is access, and kids who maybe couldn't go afford to get a physical, right, to be able to get access to continue to participate. So I think this is so important for us to, to approve in a minute here. We'll see how the vote goes, just so that we don't throw up any access challenges for anybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Floor. Is there a motion to approve as presented? Mr. Taggart, is there a second? Mr. Alcozer, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you, Coach. That's approved unanimously. The next item, Ms. Jennifer Land this doesn't require any action. We're just going to review and discuss the development of the 2021 budget.
Can you start the slide? Thank you. Next slide, please. Good evening again. I am here to talk to you about the preliminary projections for the general fund, school nutrition, and debt service budgets for the 2021 school year. And I want to discuss with you how the budgets are being developed this year. Next slide, please. So when we look at and talk about the general fund budget, this slide is not anything that's new to you. We talked about it in depth at the board workshop that we had, but I wanted you to look at this again because I wanted to point out some different aspects this time. When we are creating the 2021 budget, we are building upon what has happened in the 1920 school year. And given where we are right now, we still have some uncertainty, and I think I've probably used that word 1,000 times, so you're definitely familiar with it by now. But we do have uncertainty, and even in this current fiscal year with wrapping it up, and we have some more uncertainty with next year and the future years. But I wanted to point out that with the 1920 budget, this is based on our estimates or projections as of May 30th. You know, things change constantly, but we have to make a stance and take some assumptions in mind and develop where we think we are at a given point in time. So in looking at the 1920 budget, you'll see that there is a positive net change in fund balance. And what this means is that with that positive amount that we are currently projecting in fund balance, we can continue to look at some expenses, even in the 1920 year. One being, how are we going to address our technology needs? And that is upcoming. I think Mike Morgan is going to talk about that later. But I wanted to point out that net change in fund balance being positive, and we anticipate that we would be able to continue to explore options for purchasing items that are going to be needed to support instruction for the beginning of next year. And also, I want to point out that the fund balance is increasing if we do have an addition to fund balance. So what that means is right now, where we are going in the future is really going to be determined by where we end up this year. So let's move over to the 2021 budget. We went with the moderate projection, which means that we're looking at half of the demographer's growth for Belton ISD next year. That was the assumption. But the other major assumption is the tax rate that has been applied to the 21 fiscal year budget. I want to point out again that this again is an estimate because TEA will tell us what our tax rate is going to be once we receive certified values, which are supposed to come out in July. So when you look at that tax rate, that is just an estimate at this time. TEA will tell us our tax rate when we get to that point in July. But what will happen is if our tax rate, M&O tax rate ends up being different, our state funding will actually change in relation to that tax rate. So the amount that we're looking for in tax collections and the amount that we are looking at in FSP, the total amount will be almost the same. It's just that we could have some fluctuation in each of those categories. Again, I wanted to stress that because this is different for us moving into the 2021 fiscal year, because this is the first year that TEA is going to calculate that. And also, when you look at our expense amount, I want to again point out that we have already captured in the raises that Mr. Schiller will discuss with you later on regarding our compensation plan. So this is an indication of where we could be next year. Again, there are so many factors that we have to consider, but this is our estimate of where we believe we could be given the assumptions at the bottom, such as based on current law with TEA, and assuming or considering that we would be fully funded through TEA. So this is where we could be for the 2021 fiscal year. When you look at those out years, 22 and 23 fiscal year, again, these are simply that, estimates, they're projections based on where we are at a point in time. And when you look at these rough estimates, they are just to give an idea of where we could possibly end up. But again, due to the volatility, those numbers will change. It's not a fact of whether they will change. It is they will change, but we don't know the extent to which they will change. So when you look at the budgets for 2021, I liken it to, if you are right now trying to plan for your retirement 20 years out. I was thinking about this last week and I thought, okay, in 20 years, I'll be ready to retire. And I immediately thought about all of the factors, all of the things that are going to change in the meantime. You know, what will my income look like? But what will my expenses look like? So when you look at this general fund budget, I want you to imagine planning for your retirement 20 years out and the level of volatility that would be in that 20-year range. The only difference is our level of volatility has been collapsed to 1 year. So just think about that. When you're taking 20 years and you think about the volatility, we have just as much volatility in 1 year. Next slide, please. In looking at school nutrition, this is your first time seeing this, but again, school nutrition is clouded with uncertainty, even in this 1920 year. When you look at the projection for how we could end the 1920 school year, you'll see that our revenue estimate is significantly lower than our original budget. And that is really due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We lost about a third of our school year due to the pandemic. So instead of having 6 or 9 months of school nutrition revenue, we've ended up with about 6 months of that revenue. So that's why you see such a sharp decrease in that number. We were fortunate enough to have a nice fund balance in school nutrition, and our expenses included a lot of equipment or capital purchases that we have been able to hold off in buying for the end of this year in anticipation that we want to look at our budget for next year and see where we might end up. So we had done some really, really aggressive equipment replacement, but that's been put on hold for now. And it is in no way affecting the quality of the food that we're providing to kids. These were more enhancements to get us to a level that we wanted to be in terms of a desired level, not necessarily something that we needed to continue operations. So we were able to hold off on those expenses. So our expenses also, our expenses went down because of the delay in equipment purchases, but our food costs also went down in this year. So we are anticipating that we would have about $1 million in a deficit balance for school nutrition. But like I previously said, we have a nice fund balance in school nutrition that we can absorb that in. And with next year, we are assuming that our meal prices will remain the same, our federal reimbursement rates will remain the same, and that our expenses will only increase by about 2%. And with that, we also assume that we are going to return to similar revenue levels and participation rates. This was one of the items that was on that iceberg slide that I showed you was meal participation. We still don't know what that looks like, but this is the projection that we decided to go with until we know more. And as we know more, we can definitely modify our revenue and as well as expense projections. And when you look at the out years, again, rough estimate of where we might be. Next slide. With our debt service, we are looking at our tax collections being on target this year for 1920, and our expenses are pretty steady in our debt service because we know what our payments are going to be. When you look at 2021, we have made pretty similar assumptions here in debt service that we've made for general fund in terms of our taxes and property values. The INS tax rate, I'm assuming that this model assumes that the rate does not change. And this model also incorporates the preliminary value growth that we have received in April, which was 17.84%. Now, this is where we vary just slightly from our general fund, because in the out years, we used a 5% property value growth instead of that 3%, because this fund has a more comfortable fund balance in it. And we have also each year tried to either defease debt or pay down debt early. We felt that we could be a little bit more aggressive in terms of the 5% growth here. But the out years also assume that we don't issue any bonds. In the facilities meeting, we did talk about what our bond capacity could possibly be given these assumptions. And we still have some ways to go with that, and we'll continue to monitor it. But overall, our debt service really looks good. We're strong. The other thing I wanted to point out is if you look at that state revenue row, you'll see that the state revenue goes down each year, all the way to 2023, where it's pretty much phased out. That is something that will most likely happen as our tax rate, our property tax values continue to grow. And the faster they grow, the less state support we will get on our debt service side. Next slide. So our next steps are quite simple, but they are so grand. In July, when we get certified values, we will be able to issue a proposed final budget. And then in August, we will put an ad in the paper, and we will hold the public meeting for you all to adopt the budget and set the tax rate. One thing I do want to reiterate about the tax rate is even though TEA tells us our tax rate, as a board, you have the authority to approve a lower tax rate, but not a higher tax rate. And with that, Belton ISD had already issued a TRE, or had voter approval for a tax ratification election. So our tax rate was already at the highest level, and TEA considers that when they give us our tax rate. Some districts, their tax rates are going to remain as high as possible. Other districts, such as Belton, we do anticipate that our tax rate will be lower due to that compression. So with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. Board, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Taggart.
Sit around and study these numbers all the time and read and go online and look at different people writing about these things. And I just want to compliment Jennifer again. I can't tell her thanks enough. I know I always do this, but Jennifer, you are doing a really good job. I like your vision, and I feel comfortable, really comfortable when I tell our stakeholders out there that we really do have a superstar at Central and her staff taking care of our money and our future. I just want to tell you that there's a lot of confidence that we get to spread it into the community because of you and your team. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Mr. Taggart. Yes, Mr. Floor.
Yeah, to echo what Ty said, thank you so much for entertaining our crazy questions and my crazy questions. You know, I appreciate all the effort that goes into that and slicing and dicing this so many different ways, you know, to make sure that we're comfortable with these numbers. But just so appreciative of that. Thank you. Hey, one other thing, which is, I'm not sure who to address this to, right? One thing I might like to consider is how might we be able to reward people for innovation? Right. And so if somebody were to identify an opportunity in a process or in the use of materials or whatever, right, that may allow us to save in some of these areas, right, how might we be able to potentially reward somebody for that? So it just, I don't know that we need to have a conversation on that now, but just thinking about how we could impact, you know, the numbers that Jennifer presented.
Also, is that something, Dr. Smith, if you can take back for us and have one of your team come back and with a, maybe in the Friday report or maybe the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions or comments from Ms. Land, we're going to just take a 5-minute break if that's okay, and we'll come right back. Please mute yourself and please stop your video. Yes, Ms. Lee. Janet, you're muted.
Manuel had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Manuel, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. Jennifer, just one thing. I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. You said that you were taking in some assumptions. One of the assumptions was the compensation package that Todd's going to bring to us this evening is included in the numbers that you've provided to us this evening. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Please mute and stop your video, board members. Okay. 6:54 and we are back. You all ready? Yay, let's do it. Okay, the next item up for discussion and action is Mr. Schiller's going to talk to us about the employment of administrative employees.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. So tonight I have the privilege of recommending 3 administrators to you tonight. The first one being Jennifer Aragon for Director of English, Language Arts, and Social Studies. Jennifer has 10 years of education, has a bachelor's degree from Concordia University, master's degree from Texas State University, and comes to us from Leander ISD, where she was the Dean of Instruction. The second one I have to recommend tonight is Amy Armstrong. As you know, Amy Armstrong is currently at High Point Elementary. Recommendation would be for her at Director of Math and Science. 25 years in education, 13 of those years in Belton ISD. She has a bachelor's degree from University of Nebraska and master's degree from Texas State University. And the last one I have is Akia Chipola, and we're recommending her for assistant principal at Tarver Elementary. Akia has 8 years in education and is currently a teacher coach at South Belton Middle School.
Board have any comments or questions about that? I'll entertain a motion. Is there a motion to approve as presented? Mr. Floor, is there a second? I thought I saw Ms. Lee's hand go up. All approved, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Okay, Mr. Schiller, you're still up. Let's talk to us about the compensation plan.
Thank you. So last month we shared in May our annual compensation survey, highlighted areas of concerns. And last week we spent some time reviewing through a proposed plan that provides 2 things, a salary increase for each and every employee and a restructure of some pay grades that will increase our ability to attract and retain staff. Since then, we received some feedback regarding differentiation amongst the pay grades and sustainability within the budget. And considering these 2 items, I can tell you that decisions on position placement was based on market, specifically those areas where we want to attract and retain staff and look at districts with enrollment sizes of 12 to 17,000. We feel that the plan submitted provides our best opportunity to accomplish these things. In terms of the budget, we have worked closely with Jennifer to discuss the impact and sustainability of these items. And based on what we know, we feel we can move forward with these changes. That being said, because we've gotten that feedback, I would like to see if there's any discussion that needs to occur before providing a recommendation.
Comments or questions regarding this, Mr. Floor?
I do. Hey, I didn't even raise my hand yet.
I saw it. I saw it moving. On your fingertips.
No, I mean, I want to say thank you so much for taking a look at this, right? I mean, the two-part approach, right? You know, what are we going to do for the staff from a salary, just an annual salary standpoint? And then what do we want to do for the future, right? And I know what it takes to kind of look at all of this, and have had to do very similar exercises sort of in my world. So I have a great appreciation for what you've done here and all of the effort that goes into it. And certainly understand that what we want to do is we want to give the administration the tools in the toolbox to go out and get who we need to get, right? And so that we can build, you know, ultimately what that journey of a graduate looks like, what we expect to have out of Belton graduates. Like it's all about letting you all have that toolbox. And so I think this is great effort. Going through it, I know we talked about it a week ago, and I've crunched a lot of this in my own spreadsheets as well. And there were a couple. I would like to make a couple proposed changes, or at least talk about a couple proposed changes as I looked at this. And really, there's a difference between looking at this from the roles and sort of where they map and the people in those roles, right? This is like completely separate from people, right? And so when I was looking at this, right, there were, I'm looking at like the level 7 and above from an administration standpoint. And so when you look at directors, you know, there's really seemingly two groups of directors in there. There's directors who were previously at a level 4 and directors that were previously at a level 6. And it looks like, and I think from our conversation last week, one of your guiding principles was, hey, look, let's try to get those directors together, right? And that's certainly a good way to look at that. So when I kind of crunched the data as well, it also looked like there maybe could be 2 stratifications of directors. And so, you know, looking at those and looking at, you know, so the recurring salary expense impact and the uncertainty that's coming forward, maybe we take an extra step, right? If you feel like 7 is the right place for them to be, can we take the step of maybe we get the folks who were previously a 4 to a 6 this time, and get the folks that are currently a 6 to a 7 this time, and then revisit this on an annual basis when we talk about salaries, right? I think it would be a healthy thing to do for us to continually revisit this, because I don't think we've ever looked at it in this kind of detail, at least not that I recall. And so that's one change that I would like to propose. And maybe I'll just kind of go down my list here and talk through each. So the next one down, I guess, is the head football coach piece of it. Oh my gosh, I've been so impressed with the 2 gentlemen that we have in that role. I think we're so blessed to have Coach Sniffen and Coach Cope, and, you know, building our Tiger Strong and Bronco Elite. And so this is not about either of those guys personally. You know, I've got a little bit of heartburn here still at this being moved to an 8. You know, we have hired 2 coaches recently, very recently, within the last year, and who haven't played a game yet. And so if we believe this is the right place for the coaches to go, you know, I would like to see us hold them at 7 for right now and come back and revisit it potentially, and see where those guys need to go. Let's see. Also looking at the list, and what I'm looking off to the side at my list from the workshop, you know, I would propose that, you know, we keep the athletic director at an 8. And again, sort of looking at that market data, you know, and keeping a vision of, we still want to give you guys the tools to get us the best. I think everything that I'm recommending actually still keeps us in the 90 to 95, 90 to 97% range for all of these folks. Also looking at the executive directors, it looks like there are almost 2 stratifications of executive directors. And while I think the principle used to put this together was like, well, let's try to get them all together, which makes a lot of sense. You know, they're different skill sets, right? And so if I looked at the market data and kind of mapped it to those executive director positions, it looked like potentially the executive director role for special ed and for communications looking at the market data, actually match up much better with the level 8. Wait, I'm sorry. So there's, yeah, match up with the level 8, which should still be an increase actually in their level, because I think they sit at level 7 today. And then the executive director for technology, again, looking at the market data, actually looks much more in line with a level 9. And so there may be actually 2 stratifications, and not necessarily an executive director 1 and executive director 2, but just looking at the domain and the specific markets for the skill sets there, it looked like there was a stratification in that market data. Let's see. Also, let's see, I think the principals, I think it makes sense to move to a 9. The assistant superintendents made sense. I think the deputy superintendents made sense. So it's just a couple small tweaks, right, where helps us get there incrementally, and also honors, I think, a little bit more purely in a couple of these cases what that market data actually looks like for a specific work. I think, you know, if we made these changes, every person actually still sees an increase, assuming, you know, when we look at the raises or look at the compensation package overall, you know, and there's even some sizable increases in here. You know, when I go back to the directors and look at the 4s going to a 6, that's a 10 to 12% increase potentially, depending on where they are in that scale. Whereas the 4s going to 7 is like a 17% increase. And so, you know, that's still a very sizable increase. And I think, again, getting us to that 90 to 95, 90 to 97% still gives you the tools to go out and get folks. And I think if you run into a situation where, you know, there's a particular position that you're trying to fill and you just can't find candidates, I mean, that's a great time to let's have another conversation, I think, and say, okay, great. Like, if that's what it's going to take, let's look at that and see what we need to do there. But I mean, so impressed with the effort that went into this. So, you know, Dr. Smith, Todd, the team of people, that the army that was behind you, I'm sure, you know, I think this is definitely moving in the right direction, and very much worth considering. I'll yield the floor.
Chris, before I let Todd weigh in, I just want to clarify, just so I'm clear on it. So a couple of the key friction points that you're bringing up are really about sustainability in budget and being just concerned about that for the future with unknown COVID pieces. And
Sure.
Also feeling like there should be a differentiation in pay for some of these specific categories. You've done a really good job saying it's not about a person. It just
Right.
feels like that some of these job responsibilities are a little bit different, and you'd like to dive into that a little more. Am I right on target on those?
Absolutely. And one area where that really jumped out was specifically at the executive director, right? Where if we collapse them all down into one, we end up with 2 executive directors that are actually like 110% plus, you know, on that market data, and one that's kind of right there, right? So, you know, again, if we want to try to use the data to drive where we're going, there were just a couple of things that were weird. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I'll let Todd take over and talk a little bit about rationale and stuff.
Yeah, so when I was looking at this, I think one thing to remember is, especially when you talk about those directors, and the executive director of technology would be included in this too. Anyone who is not an SBEC certified individual is going to contribute to Social Security. So those directors and consolidating them in that particular pay grade, that was part of the impetus behind that, to be able to do that. We're having to contribute a little bit over 6% more than other employees in other districts towards Social Security. It was the same thing with our paraprofessionals and auxiliary employees. And so SBEC certified individuals don't do that. So we just took that into consideration as we're assessing that market,
Sure.
looking at that survey data. So when,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, so on that point though, those folks also get an additional benefit, right? And so,
Sure.
Yes, there may be an additional contribution up front, but there's an additional benefit on the backside that other folks don't get as well. And I know it takes a little bit to get to that backside benefit, right? For sure. But it's not all just a cost impact, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the same type of thing with executive directors. I know you know, you can look at the data, and I can find data that supports one position or another position. There's just so much data that's out there. So when 12 to 17,000 enrollment district data sets us up for where we're going to be in a few years as we continue to grow. And then when I looked at your requests and kind of determined the dollar amount for those, we're only talking about $40,000 to $50,000 difference for the change or not making the change.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's something else I think we need to also consider as well.
Yeah, no, that was good. It was hard for me to actually calculate that because I don't have the individual
Salaries.
data, right?
Right.
And I guess my point there might be, we might need every $40,000 and $50,000 we can get. And we're not in a bad spot, right? And we just heard from Jennifer. I think there's going to be a lot of unexpected costs, be that new technology we need to invest in. We'll talk about that later in the meeting. I think we don't know what we don't know. And, even taking an interim step for a couple spots to get us almost there, I think still is a great improvement, to the individuals that are in those roles, and to the ability to go out and get somebody, if we need to, right? I mean, those bands also do overlap pretty significantly, right? And so, the difference between, like a 6 and a 7 for a 226-day, employee there's really only like a $7,000 gap, right? That you can get to at level 7 that you can't get to at level 6. And so I don't actually think anybody's harmed, and I would need you to tell me this, right? But I don't actually think anybody's salary progression, making this change, like 4 to a 6 as an example this year, I don't actually think anybody's harmed by that. I think they still have the same ability to access the same amount of salary going forward. So again, it's not about the individual. I think it's about the framework and where that should be.
Yeah. In particular with those director positions, I can tell you that, we decide compensation based on years of experience. And so when you look at that difference between the 6 and the 7, it's about, I think it's about 4,000, or maybe it's 5 and 6 between the two director levels. It's about a $4,000 difference in terms of pay for an individual. So that's the difference that you.
Right. And so the only place where somebody is harmed potentially is if they're already maxed out. And so right now, if we look at everybody that's a 4, right, and the maximum salary for somebody that's at a 4 right now, in theory, kind of mapping them over, like, I think there's still going to be room to run, right? And unless you can tell us that, somebody's maxed out. And again, I think the principle is let's do no harm, right? We don't want to cause a problem for somebody, to not get a raise because they're maxed out. But if we can do this and not do any harm, why not take the extra step?
Chris, I just want to thank you for, thoughts and concerns and bringing them up. I appreciate that. This is exactly why we did the workshop last week. We're in a challenging situation in creating compensation plans and budget plans for the future, and we're doing our best at trying to make sure we're hitting the right targets. But I appreciate your thoughts and concerns. The only thing that I would say on this too is that while you brought up a couple of times about doing no harm, you're absolutely right. But one of the other things that we're trying to do is create stability in our system in making sure that people aren't seeking jobs elsewhere, especially in local markets. Because as we go through some of these challenges moving forward, I don't want to lose great leaders in our system for $4,000 in a neighboring district. And so that's one of the key things that we really wanted to dive into is how do we make sure that we are having all of our staff, our teachers, our auxiliary staff, everyone feel like they're being compensated appropriately so that they are not looking elsewhere, because we need their great leadership during this time coming up. So that's the only other thing that I would add to it is it's not just about doing no harm in this one. It's really about people being satisfied, not only with culture, but that we're paying them at an appropriate rate.
Mr. Taggart?
I guess it goes back to what I was saying earlier after Jennifer spoke. I've known, Todd a long time. I've talked to a lot of people around here, and he's very respected in his line of work. I trust his, we trust him all the time to go out and find us qualified people. But I think when I first got on the board 3 years ago, there were some inequities in several different levels of compensation in our district. And we have addressed it. You know, obviously last year with House Bill 3, it was a really good step, and we appreciate the folks down in Austin doing that for us. But I trust what Todd's doing, and just knowing how hard him and Jennifer and Todd have worked, and Matt have worked behind the scenes to put this budget together. I think the one thing that Matt just brought out is the thing that I've been thinking about this. It's the retention of the qualified people that we have. And I know a couple of years ago, we lost a couple of people that were principals to Region 12 and some other places. And it was pretty much a salary driven move. And so we've got to make up the difference there. And those directors are the same. And just being the old athlete and the old coach, I know what these head coaches and these campus coordinators do. I think when you look in most communities across Texas, the second most talked about hire in every small town is always the head football coach. And maybe in some towns, it's not even the superintendent. It is the head football coach that's the most talked about. They are there for image. They're there for school spirit. They're also over a tremendous amount of people that are underneath them. Like at Belton High School this last year, we had 1,000 kids walking in and out of that field house. So their impacts are high. I think we've got two outstanding gentlemen in that position, and I'd like to see them stick around here for a while. I think we're going to have some challenges in the next couple of years, and we need that stability to get us over that hump once our numbers start growing and some of those areas. So I'm gonna trust what our team at the top has done and stick with their recommendation. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Taggart. Go ahead, Mr. Floor.
Sorry, I'm sorry. So just to be clear, like I have complete trust in Todd. Like the proposal made is not about not trusting Todd at all, right? I mean, I think he did great work. I think the administration is doing what they absolutely should do, right? They should take a look at what this looks like. How do we get to the dream location? They should be asking for the moon, right? That is what we should expect from the administrative team. Ask for the moon, right? And then, it's our responsibility to take a look at this and say, great, that's a great path, right? How do we get there? And maybe we don't get to the moon in the first shot, right? We end up in the stars somewhere, right? And we adjust and we ultimately get to the moon, right? So it's not about trust at all. It's about, if we go out and look at the community and get the stability piece, like what does the community expect, from us? It's not just to say, it's to push back a little bit, right? And the challenge the proposal to make sure that it really is the direction that we want to go, right? And it's not about trust at all.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Floor.
you saying that, Chris. I'm sorry, Madam President. I appreciate you saying that. Just know from a superintendent perspective, and I know I can speak for Todd too. Neither one of us feels that way. We appreciate great minds in this, and this. Our job is to present the board with good information so that you all can make good decisions for the future moving forward in BISD, and we will do whatever y'all need moving forward.
Yeah, Chris, I'll add that you're doing exactly what we asked you to do. When we presented this at the workshop on Monday night, we asked you to kind of take a look at it and give us feedback. So do appreciate it, really do.
Mr. Norwood, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, it's good points brought up all the way around. I think kind of the perspective that I take on this, I can understand the incremental steps, and I can see where that could be favorable, but I think the problem is that we are going to be right back where we are now, a year from now, revisiting, whereas I believe that what Todd and them have done, and I could be wrong though, was to make these moves to put us into the same scheduling, if you will, as those 12 to 17,000 district out there that we are competing with and that we are in the marketplace for. But I think, and so if we can set our adjustments now, then we can go forward. But I think another thing in this, and I appreciate all the hard work that everybody did on it. And Chris, you looked at it though, but the part that sticks out to me is the numbers that Jennifer brought to us, and that, we stay well within our parameters of what our policy has said we are comfortable with and doing this. Because if we went over those, if we got outside of those parameters, then I would certainly agree. It's like, no, we cannot. But based on her conservative modeling and then the parameters that our policy says, we are going to stay within these numbers. It is there. And I think this is a step that we have to take you know, going forward, I mean, I appreciate everybody's opinion on it, but really I come down to Jennifer's analysis of it and saying that, you know, she's comfortable with the numbers, you know, using these, and that's what was in the budget we saw earlier tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Norwood. Mr. Alcozer, did you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am, I do. In echoing what Jeff said, and then some of the comments that Chris made, one comment that Chris made is that we don't know what we don't know, which does cause me some concern. And when we're looking at the bracket that we're talking about in terms of the size of school districts between 12 and 17,000 students, of course, we're at the bottom of that. We're just, you know, right at 13,000 students. And of course, not all school districts are created the same. I mean, there's rooftop districts and there's districts that have a lot of industry and things of that, you know, so there's other variables that we have to consider. And Todd, you made a comment about discussing these issues with Jennifer and your team, and you mentioned impact and sustainability. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, the impact and sustainability? And that goes in line with what Jeff's comments were about what Jennifer brought to us, just to give me some comfort in going along with the recommendation. I'd like to hear some more comments from you about the impact and sustainability of these increases, especially when you have an increase of, you know, 17%. Obviously, that's very, very significant. And I want to also say that, you know, you mentioned, I know Chris mentioned the athletic director. The athletic director position, obviously, you know, Coach Skidmore has now taken on a much bigger role because he's got two big areas to manage. So I certainly wouldn't want a situation that's going to affect him because he has a lot more responsibility than he had before. You know, Chris is right. The other coaches haven't played a game yet. They take those positions with those salaries in mind. But at the end of the day, I still want to know more about the impact and sustainability of the recommendation and how that came into play in making this recommendation.
I can tell you that, so, you know, when we look at that market data, these are some significant changes, some significant increases in some regards. And we've talked excessively about it with Jennifer Land and Matt. And we probably all three have lost sleep over looking through this information. And we want to be sure that we're not setting ourselves up or putting ourselves in a position that's going to create difficulties for us budget-wise. And so Jennifer has assured us that we're okay. We don't know what the future brings, but as it is right now, we feel that this is sustainable. And we've got plans in place. If there's budget implications in the next year or two, some areas that we need to look at that are outside of staffing and salaries. You know, and we could implement a hiring freeze and things of that nature, not to impact current staff. So we've had some deep conversations about the implications of budget if it takes a downward turn the following year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have Ms. Land jump in here. I saw her come on camera, and then I'll add one more thing to that.
I just want to say that I think I've stressed before that when we look at the budget, we're looking at variables. And I want to bring up one thing that I talked about, which was that 3% variance that we try to be within. And if you look at the total amount of the increases, our 3% variance would encapsulate this $2.9 million increase, because right now our 3% variance is about $3.5 million. So as we look at the budget and look into the future, if we do fall within that 3% variance, whether high or low, what we are proposing for the compensation would be covered either way by what we would consider a 3% variance. I try to be really conservative, but we just don't know what the future holds. And I'm going to go back to the fact that when you are budgeting, it's similar to your own personal budgets at home. We have to prioritize and we have to look at what's important to us. And if we are saying that our staff and compensation is important to us, we will make sure that the budget works around those priorities.
I think, Manuel, to answer your question, the only thing that I would add to that is the where I was able to stop losing sleep about this proposal is when the point that Todd just brought up, the budgets proposed that Jennifer has given you moving forward still provide us with in that range that is a board policy regarding fund balance. That does not include any other cost saving measures that we would employ if we were to realize significant budget impacts in the future. And so when I say that is, then I think through, do we have the funds available to us without doing any of these other things to positively impact our staff? I think the answer to me, based on what I see from Jennifer and Todd, is yes. And what I see actually getting us to that exceptional student learning experience moving forward, it's the quality of our staff that we have in front of us. So I want to keep that stability and I want to attract those types of leaders moving forward. So that's what really drove me at the end to be able to say, Jennifer is telling me that we're in the range, we're following board policy, and we haven't even planned in any of the other cost saving measures that we would do so if we were faced with budget implications.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Mr. Floor, did you have something else?
I don't know. I might just be being overly sensitive, but you know, I'm not coming from the point of I don't value the staff, right? Like that's definitely not where I'm coming from, right? Because I think if we look back, like we can't pay anybody associated with ISD enough, right? Or what they're worth, right? And I don't think we would get anybody on this call right now, you know, to disagree with that. You know, so it's not about that at all. You know, when I do look at the numbers, they're approaching the market, right? I mean, it's between 92 and 98% of the market, which is really considered the market. And so, you know, I think even for these few positions out there, you know, that would be impacted by this, this is still a good place to be. And I guess I'll stop there.
Any further discussion?
I have a question. So we can expect that when we are voting on the budget in our July or August meeting, that there's going to be great community input this year. There's going to be great community concern. And we've already read about that in the papers. So I think my question would be, I realize all the hard work that has gone into it and I respect it, but I hear Chris proposing that we can do leveled changes and this is something that is going to happen, but I hear him communicating that we have an opportunity to show our community that we're willing to be fiscally responsible in a slightly more conservative way at a time when our community members have been hit hard by a pandemic that we couldn't have predicted. So I think it's just maybe a question or a reinforcement of what Chris is saying, but I think we have to be prepared to talk to our community in July and August and be very open if they have questions for us and be able to answer those questions. Did we consider other options?
Thank you, Dr. Montgomery. Any other discussions? Is this something, and I appreciate all the healthy discussions around this. I mean, that's one of the key things I really appreciate about this particular board, the healthy discussions we're willing to dive into. That's unique and very much needed for BISD. Is this a particular item that board members, this board, can vote on one way or the other today? Or is this something that you all feel like we can't even touch today and we need to have some further dialogue and bring it back? I say that because I'm about to ask for a vote, and so I just need to know. Go ahead, Mr. Floor.
But I hate to even ask this question, right? But there's two things that we're looking at here, right? So we're looking at sort of the annual compensation change, right? And we're looking at a sort of the mapping change, right? I don't know if it's possible to decouple those two, right? Because I don't want to hold up any kind of, you know, increased conversation or anything, right? And so one thing we could, I don't know, I'm looking at Dr. Smith and Todd on my screen here. Like, I mean, one thing I would need you guys to tell us is, like, is it even possible to decouple those so that we could make sure that everybody knows, like, the annual increase is coming, and then, you know, and then if we can't come to an agreement on the rest of this, you know, have the rest of that conversation, you know, either in a workshop or, you know, in July. I don't know what kind of problems that causes.
Todd, do you want to weigh in on?
So you could split it up, and you could have two different, you know, you could take care of the salary increases tonight, and then do the other changes in the future. But that being said, I think by July 1st, we would really need to have an answer on where we're heading. There's some languages and contracts about, you know, adjusting individual salaries after a contract has been provided. So really that July 1st is kind of the date that we need to have something in place and communicate it out by that July 1 plan in terms of a compensation plan.
So I think just from my point of view on that, I agree with Todd wholeheartedly. I think we would like to get this wrapped up before July 1. Y'all know we have key positions that we are in the midst of hiring right now. And I think that's some of these things are extremely important for that. As always, we want the board to be able to feel comfortable with your vote. And so if the fact is that you don't have enough information in front of you and need additional information to come to a vote, is our president has mentioned, we are glad to get you more information and can provide that for you. We would probably ask for an additional board meeting here in the month of June to actually get this resolved in a manner that I think would help us out as a school district. But if it's a matter of just disagreeing with the proposal that's in place, then I think that that's a question that y'all have to wrestle with as a board, because I don't know what all would change from the administration's recommendation at this point. I think we've come forward and provided the recommendation that we felt the most comfortable with at this point, after spending all of the hours trying to figure out what the best path forward is. So we would, if the board would like us to bring back additional information for you to consider, we'd be glad to do that, obviously. But as far as the presentation and what we are recommending, our recommendation is there tonight.
You know, I'd like to say just this, and that, you know, Chris knows I'm his biggest fan in regard to questioning, because I think it's healthy. I think it's good for the community to hear that we have our own thoughts and our own areas of interest and expertise. And Chris has done a lot of work on that. So I totally appreciate all the work that Chris has done and the thoughtful questioning, because just like Todd said, that's what y'all asked us to do. And at the same time, I do know the hours of work that admin's put in on that, and that you have wrestled with this question as well. And knowing that that is your recommendation, I'm personally ready to move forward on it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lee. At this point, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Alcocer.
I just wanted to make one additional comment. I want to echo what Rosie is saying about being good stewards and about making sure that the public knows that we struggle over this, especially spending money, especially in a situation that we're in right now. But one other point I want to make is that Todd mentioned that what Chris is talking, and I'm not looking at the numbers in front of me, but we're talking about $40,000 or $50,000. Is that right, Todd? Total? Okay.
Yes.
So that would be like, what is that, 1% of the total compensation plan that you're proposing?
Let's see here.
I think Todd's doing the numbers as you speak,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah, you're talking about 1.3, 1.5%.
Yeah. So it's a very small increment that we're talking about. It's not a huge increment. But at the same time, I want to say, though, that the points that Chris is making obviously are very valid. and I don't want staff or anybody in positions of authority in our district to think that we're not considering them to be important to the district. And I mean, this is a struggle. I mean, when you brought this to us the other day, I was thinking about it a lot and thinking, wow, you know, if it was a different time, I guess the struggle wouldn't be there as much if we weren't in this pandemic and all these things that are going on. But obviously there's going to be questions, just like Rosie said, it already hit the paper pretty quick. And I think it's because of the timing. But at the same time, we got to keep moving forward. We got to keep doing what we need to do to educate our kids. And I want to echo what Matt has said many times is about, we've got to get the right folks. And you know, part of the strength of this district is the people that we have in the district. You know, the administrators, the staff, teachers, everyone that participates in this district. I mean, that's why this is a good place. You know, Chris said it is a good place, and it's a good place for a reason. And a lot of it has to do with the people that we have in these positions. So I don't know that we can table this based upon what you're saying and come back at a later time. So I'll echo what Janet says. I think we need to move forward with a vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Manuel. Anyone else?
I think
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think based on what Matt had said, and that the substance of what they have proposed is not going to change, then, you know, more information is probably not going to change anybody's opinion at this point, and the administration is going to say this is our proposal. Based on that, I would say, yeah, we probably do need to vote on it, but something that, you know, Chris has done a good job of pointing out, hey, here's some concerns, which is our job. And then back to what Manuel and what Rosie said is, we do need to be prepared to, and I don't want to use the word defend, but to be able to talk about this in public and not hide from it. And here's the reasons that we did it. You know, these are the reasons. Manuel said, you know, we got to move forward. The pandemic it's not going to stop 12,350 kids from showing up at our doorsteps next year. They are going to be there, but we don't know what it's going to look like. We already had that discussion for an hour, but we are going to be educating them, and we don't get to stop. We have to move forward. And I don't know that there's ever really a good time to do something like this. It was easy last year because HB3 gave us the ability to do it, but I don't know that it's always going to be a difficult decision to make, but I do think we need to move forward with the vote tonight if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Norwood. Anyone else? Again, just wonderful, healthy discussion. Thank you, Mr. Floor and Mr. Schiller and Dr. Smith and all of you all who have weighed in to comment. At this point, though, we're going to go ahead and rubber meeting the road. I'll entertain a motion for those who will. Is there a motion to accept as presented? Mr. Taggart, is there a second? Mr. Norwood, I'm sorry. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, in favor, I'm going to just do a roll call here because I want to make sure I get this right. In favor, I've got myself, Suzanne McDonald. I've got Mr. Ty Taggart, Jeff Norwood, Manuel Kozer, Dr. Rosa Montgomery, and Janet Lee. And Mr. Floor declines. Thank you. That passes. The next item.
Can I say real quick? I just want to thank the board. I told you all a couple of meetings ago, we're engaging in really tough discussions for a board and a administrative team right now. And I applaud you, Chris, for bringing up your thoughts, and I thank you for it because I think it does make us better. And I am extremely thankful for our board and the discussions you're having. And I just want to make sure that that's super clear to everyone in our community.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Was there something else? Did I miss it? Okay, Dr. Love Smith, talk to us first reading, EIC local and EIC exhibit.
Good evening. Yes, tonight we are discussing EIC local and EIC exhibit as a first reading. We had some great discussion at our board policy meeting about a week or so ago in regard to these policies. And tonight we're just going to, I'm just presenting to you a focus on the annual review in what I'd call cleanup of this policy. It focuses around 3 areas. 1, updating the policy to remove any reference to the class of 2020. As you recall, we did a major overhaul of this policy, which does in fact calculate class rank and grade GPA, grade point average, in 2018. And as a result of that transition we have a policy that addresses multiple classes. And so for every year until the class of 2022, we'll want to revise just for removal of language from the prior year. In addition to this policy tonight, we are adding and proposing the adding of OnRamps in any location where there is a reference to dual credit courses for dual enrollment. OnRamps is considered a dual enrollment course. We have that presentation following this, and Tiffany Sommerfeld is going to give you more detail specific to the OnRamps course. We are partnering with the University of Texas at Austin. It allows us to utilize our teachers to create a course very similar to dual credit. We follow the course sequence for the University of Texas, and that using our teachers, at the end of the completion of the course, students have an opportunity to decide whether or not they'll place it on their transcript. For high school seniors, this is a great option simply because this is their first introduction to a college course, and it gives them the flexibility to decide if their performance in this course is something they'd like to follow them on their college transcript or not. Because it is available as a college credit, and it's similar to dual credit, and in looking at districts similar to our policies, it does fall to, and I'm recommending that it be placed in the same place as a dual credit course. That change is impacted both in EIC local and then the revision in EIC exhibit. In EIC exhibit, it does in fact place these courses on a level 3, calculated the same as dual credit. The final revision for tonight, if you'll move forward to the last, to the next page, keep going. I believe it's page 5. Is a paragraph that has been inserted specific to our at-home learning experience. As you all know, we all struggled in a new environment for how to amend this policy. I did talk specifically with Eric Narcisse with TASB, who gives us guidance on our board policies, about the inclusion of this paragraph. His initial recommendation is that it is not necessary, that a school board does in fact have the right to amend a policy as we did through a board resolution. And so to go into the specifics of how this policy might be amended would negate the board's ability to really look at all the circumstances at any given time and weigh those in for specifically how to recommend changes. However, as we discussed in the board policy meeting, we've decided as an administrative team to go ahead and recommend that we do put something in. This doesn't surpass the board's ability at any time to offer up a board resolution and to amend the policy in any way, given certain circumstances. However, it does clearly communicate to all of those involved that this is a policy that could be impacted when there is a disruption. One of the things that we know going into next year is that we learned a lot about grading practices, and we will try, now that everyone's experienced the at-home learning. It was not something at the time any of us were quite prepared for. It was unprecedented to call a school closure in March and not return for the remainder of the year. But our staff, our family, our students have now been through that, and we feel better equipped to really adapt grading practices for next school year, no matter what the scenario is. However, we did put in this policy a recommendation that should we experience a significant disruption for calculating GPA and class rank, the board may consider a resolution modifying items covered. This just really sends that message. Just know, students, every day matters. Every day you come matters, and we do not know what we'll be faced with in making decisions in the future. So this is what I have proposed for tonight. Again, for the first reading. This first reading allows the board to review it tonight, to review it over the next month, and then it be proposed for a final reading at the July board meeting. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Westmith. Any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Dr. Westmith, talk to us about the next item. I can't lost my train of thought.
OnRamps. It's
OnRamps. On board, all aboard, everybody.
Yes,
Here we
it's
go.
OnRamps. It's a partnership with the University of Texas, and I'm going to introduce. I believe this is the first time for her to speak to the board tonight, but Tiffany Sommerfeld. Tiffany Sommerfeld is our Director of Career Guidance and Counseling, and she oversees all the work with our dual credit, our class rank, our calculations with our counselors, and so she'll talk with you in the specifics of the OnRamps.
Welcome, Tiffany. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I just want to talk a little bit about OnRamps. It is a new program that we are implementing at Belton ISD. It's not a new program for the state, but it is new for Belton ISD. Some of the good things that I want to talk about are, it goes along with our school calendar. So I don't know if y'all have noticed, but UMHB has come out with a different calendar for this coming school year, and any of our dual credit kiddos that are going to be taking UMHB courses actually have to start a little bit early this year. But with OnRamps, it goes by our school calendar. So in the event that something happens with COVID, they would do exactly what it is that we need for our students to be successful. It's taught with a dual enrollment type of a outlook. So one of our teachers will be certified to teach the course, and we are actually starting with pre-cal, and then they will be partnered with one of the college professors as well. So the kids will have a standpoint of both high school and the college, and they're working together toward that same goal. One of the other things that is a good positive, a pro for this particular program, is you don't have to have passed the TSI in order to be enrolled in a dual credit. Where all of our other dual credit universities, you have to pass the TSI in order to take this course. So it kind of encompasses those kiddos that didn't quite make that particular cut, but they can still get the college experience. At the end of the course, students have the ability, about a week before the actual final grades are put down to a transcript, they have the choice as to whether or not they actually want to put that grade on a college transcript. For example, if a kiddo is making a C or even a D, they'll get that college credit of 3 particular hours, but do they really want to start their freshman year off in college with something less than a 2.5? So with having the opportunity to opt out of having the college credit put on their transcript, they have the ability to do that. It'll still give them the high school credit so that they have that requirement for their graduation, but they won't have that low grade starting out with a GPA in college. So those are just kind of the pro, and actually, and one more is it's a little bit cheaper than the other dual credit. So we kind of get it's about $149 for students that are not free and reduced. Kiddos that are free and reduced lunch is about $99. So it's a little bit cheaper than our regular dual credit. Some of our other dual credit courses, they range anywhere from $100 per credit hour up to $188 per credit hour. Most of our courses are 3 credit hours, so that can get kind of pricey. So with this opportunity, and starting with pre-cal, it kind of levels the field for some of our kiddos that maybe they weren't thinking about college, but this gives them the opportunity to kind of delve into that realm as well. With OnRamps, like I said, we are starting with pre-cal. We decided on pre-cal because that's kind of one of those courses that gives kiddos that thought of, do I want to go toward a STEM type of an endorsement or something going forward in college, or am I just not quite that math person and I kind of want to go a different direction? So pre-cal is one of those courses. that they have the ability to start really kind of thinking about what their future looks like. You can take this in 10th grade. So you still have that opportunity once you're in 11th and 12th grade to maybe change your mind a little bit. Maybe you're not a STEM person and maybe you want to go a different direction. So that kind of gives levels out that playing field as well. Any questions?
Doesn't look like there are any.
I do just want to emphasize with Tiffany, we are looking very carefully at this opportunity. And after we view the success of this program, we anticipate adding future classes. It is a cost benefit to students as long as the state continues to subsidize it. Like she mentioned, it really helps with scheduling when our own teachers teach the course. Not only are we following our own school calendar, but we can minimize maybe kids that are not able to take the course because of their electives, if we can put it anywhere throughout the day. Our teachers teaching courses shares our district's philosophy because they are our employees. And so there's a lot of inherent benefits. So I really just want to emphasize that we believe this to be just the beginning of this program for our district.
Well, it's like a great opportunity. Mr. Floor, I saw you. Yes.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think this is a brilliant idea, right? And so, like, great addition. Thank you for being creative and how we bolt on new things to do great things for our kids, right? I mean, this is great. The one thing I would like us to do in the future, right, is to look at going back to EIC and the EIC exhibit and sort of where the OnRamps fits in the calculation of the GPA. I really would like us to take a look at AP, OnRamps, and dual credit and figure out maybe a way we might be able to put those together so that we have the ability for students to make a choice based on a course that they want to take, not making a choice because taking the AP version does something to their GPA that OnRamps doesn't, right? And so, but I think this is awesome. And so we just, you know, my only ask is that we maybe visit that at a later date, certainly not impacting this year at all, right?
So I'm really glad you mentioned that, Chris, because I meant to kind of say that in the EIC presentation. And so for tonight and what you reviewed with EIC, it is just our annual maintenance. But those questions that you're asking, I think those are going to naturally come when we look at our graduate profile and we look at that, really solidifying what that learner graduate looks like in our district. And I do expect at that point in time us to revisit EIC more from a content other than just an annual maintenance. And so, and there's several things within that policy that I think we can take a closer look at. So thank you. Thanks for setting me up for that one.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Okozer.
Yes, ma'am. Deanna, I don't know if you or Tiffany can answer this, but first of all, there doesn't seem to be any downside to this. This is a great idea. Secondly, the teachers that teach it from our school district, are they paid extra to participate, or how does that work?
No, they actually won't be paid extra because they'll still have their regular schedule as normal, but they get an extra training throughout the summer. So our teachers, we have 2 that are dedicated to the pre-cal program right now. We are going to be training them for a 2-week time period during the summer. And it's very extensive. What they have to do is they actually go through their entire curriculum for the entire year in 2 weeks, as if they are the student. So they will run through their whole program and be able to kind of come up with their daily activities that they're going to be working on. They'll come up with the questions so that they can kind of front load all of that information, which, you know, if something ends up happening with the COVID, we know that we have the ability to already look forward to what we are going to be teaching with this particular course. I do have one downside, however. We're not offering enough courses this year. Once we pick it all up next year, we'll have lots more to put in. But we just kind of wanted to start small just to kind of get our feet wet and see how it goes. So that's the only downside that I could come up with.
And it will all be through the University of Texas. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, that's who actually owns the program.
Okay, thank you.
That's an automatic vote for Manuel.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then we'll go ahead and put this to a vote. I'll entertain a motion to approve as presented. Miss Janet Lee, and is there a second? I see that Dr. Montgomery is second. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. We'll move on to our next item. We have our construction projects update, and there's several people listed to present. Dr. Mueller, Jared, Kurt, whoever wants to go first, let's do it.
Madam President, I think I'm going to go first. Just give you a few summary comments, and then I'll turn it over to Jared. But let me begin with Lake Belton High School. Lake Belton High School, the progress is going extremely well there. We recently processed payout number 24. We have about $9 million left to pay on this project, and that $9 million includes the 5.3 of retainage. So at this time, virtually all the major work has been completed. They're working primarily on punch list items. And as Mr. Taggart had indicated earlier, the building is really taking shape. The furniture is being moved in, and everyone's getting ready for the fall of 2020. Also, I wanted to just provide a quick update on Townsend and Associates. We've had a number of meetings where we have worked through questions and any issues that they have identified. And I would commend Bartlett Cock. They've been extremely good to work with. We have resolved virtually every issue with the exception, I think there's one still outstanding, but we anticipate that that will be resolved this week. So that has gone extremely well. Also, I would tell you that Townsend and Associates, once the board has accepted the building and authorized final payment, Townsend and Associates stands ready to provide an after-action report on their work. With respect to Belton High School Orchestra, it is ahead of schedule, not by much, but by a little bit. Currently, we're working with O'Connell Robertson to provide final detail on 3 items, and those 3 items include the emblem, which is at the front entrance of the project or the building. We're also working to provide some final detail on the lettering of the metal canopy and a little bit of landscaping around the 2 trees that have been planted there right north of the orchestra site. So that project is shaping up very well, and it's going to be an exceptional space for orchestra students in the years to come. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Thanks, Dr. Mueller.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mueller. Thank you, Board of Trustees and Dr. Smith for having us again here tonight. And we're excited to be presenting on the construction update. And thankfully, of course, Ty nor Dr. Mueller stole the thunder maybe. We get the photos here now. So if we want to roll over to the 2 slides. We'll, of course, start with the Lake Belton High School. And these are some of the photos that you see from the progress previous to this month. And if you want to go to the next slide. I think that this photo really represents and speaks to the progress that it is to date, that it really is the final details that are coming together. This is really looking like a final project. We have grass out front, we have vegetation. As you look inside the building, all those little elements are coming together to really feel like a finished product. So on the next slide, you'll see, or if you remember when we started this, the construction really started on the 2 ends of the building. So on the left end, it started with the athletics and the auditorium, and on the right end was the academics, and really worked towards the middle. And you see that in the construction today. So on the top left photo, you have the CTE classroom, pretty much fully finished at this point. As Dr. Mueller indicated, furniture is going in. And then as you work towards that middle and the dining commons, the library, that those elements from construction progress with Bartlett Cock is finishing. And then even then there, we see some of the furniture being moved into place as well. So very excited to see it. I spoke with Jill today. She's excited that there's a desk in her office. There's no chair yet. So we're keeping her out until we get the final inspection, which will happen here soon. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So this is that left end of the building and a little bit more of the outside. So it's a gymnasium in the top left and the weight room in the center. Those are pretty much finished spaces, working through punch lists. There are a couple little detail elements as we talk about building community. We're trying to build and reinforce some of that Bronco pride already in there. So you'll see the horseshoes are going down with some engraving to be able to represent that culture there. And then, of course, the baseball softball field is finishing up as well with the turf. Last month you saw the football field. And then if you go to the next slide, this is the construction log update for changes to the project. And there have just been a few additional changes here, a couple minor ones of picking up a few of the items to support elements going in and supporting education. The big one there is related to security. So that was adding some blinds within the building and security film. And again, we were really validating that cost and then took some alternatives for pleated versus unpleated curtains to bring that down a significant amount. And so overall, as Dr. Mueller indicated, we're 97% complete. So we'll see that tick up just a very little bit here as we finish out and they're starting to wind down. And then we'll switch over to Belton Orchestra on the next slide. And if you'll go one more here, then this one likewise is nearing the absolute completion here. This one is only 75% complete by the application for payment, but really they're within a week or two of finishing. So they'll catch up on billing. So this is the images of the construction throughout the time. And if you go to the next slide, you're starting to actually see the finished space. So I actually dropped by there today and they have crews working on the final little details, making sure windows are installed properly, and then working through the paving and then really working through those interior elements like acoustical panels. Casework was starting to get installed. The last element to get installed will be the winger cabinets. And they're anticipating to have final inspections here in the next couple weeks as well to be finished on time or a little bit early overall in the project and be able to occupy that for the students coming back here in the fall. And then I'll just transition real quick. We don't have an official slide for it, but the playground improvements that were approved a few months ago, we've had the opportunity to meet with administration and staff several times and then meet with each campus principal several times on that scope of work. That will officially hit the street tomorrow. And we will be looking to bring that back to the board in July for approval for construction and start rolling that out. We can give you more of an update at that time about the overall project, but still aligned with the intent of the original project and the original budget. So with that, we'll take any questions that you have on any of the three projects.
Thanks, Jared. Does the board have any comments or questions?
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I am so excited about the orchestra center. The orchestra, since its birth, has not had a home in the high school, and I am just ready for a huge celebration when that is completed. And, you know, our kids have done wonderful things in that program, so thank you for that addition.
Absolutely. We were excited about it, and let alone the new entry into the campus really speaks a lot, so it's exciting.
Mr. Taggart, you're muted. You're on mute, Ty. Did you have something you were going to say? Okay, there you go.
Looking at Jared, looking at the entrance of the orchestra, did y'all, with the new lines and stuff, is that going to mean where there's just going to be a single entrance and pass through for the cars now? I know Ben Smith was worried about that. It looks like y'all kind of got that fixed. And then did y'all darken the B? Did y'all add more color to the emblem out there? It looks darker.
We've not changed that. So with the lines, it is something that we're talking through and working through to make sure that the traffic routing is working like he would like it. So there are continued discussions there. And then regarding the B, we are looking at options there so that none of the colors have changed there at this point. We're talking about maybe adding color to the field around the B or maybe augmenting the change a little bit just to enhance the way that that looks. And that was what Dr. Mueller had referenced. We were working through those final details.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President, if I can bring something up real quick.
Sure.
Mr. Floor was going to say something. I apologize, Chris. I just wanted to make sure that our board knew also that I wanted to celebrate Dr. Mueller real quickly. So as we're wrapping up this presentation, it is important to note that this is Dr. Mueller's last official board meeting in Belton ISD. I say last official because if you would like to call another board meeting just to see him again, we will be glad to do something. I have truly, truly enjoyed my time working with Robert over the past few months, and I can tell you he's been a valuable asset to Belton ISD over the past 3 years with his work with Jared and O'Connell Robertson, with his work in Bartlett-Cock, with his work just in the overall work with our staff. I think he has been instrumental in the growth of Belton ISD over the past 3 years. I've been honored to work with him over the past couple of months here in my time in Belton ISD. And I wanted to make sure we recognize Dr. Mueller for his time here.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. And Dr. Mueller, I just didn't even believe that we actually got here. Are you really leaving this time? Really?
Really?
I mean, are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah, I think so.
No, well, I will tell you, I've appreciated my interactions with you and just appreciated all the work that you've done for BISD. And I feel like the rest of the board's about to jump in. I'm sorry if I jumped over you. So if you all have something to say, you go right ahead.
I'm curious if you'll be at the facilities meeting walkthrough of the high school on Wednesday.
Yes, my last day is at the end of June, so
Okay,
yes, I'll be there.
good. We'll look forward to seeing you that.
Yes, absolutely. And
Just don't want to let you go.
Hey, I just want to jump in here real quick, Dr. Mueller, and just say how much I'm going to miss your sense of humor and all the things. I know I've enjoyed visiting with you through the years, but we've had a really challenging last year for several different aspects, and one of the blessings that we have had has been you in the background sticking with us, going the extra mile, and we can't express our appreciation more to you for sticking it out with us. Thank you so much for doing that.
Well, let me say I appreciate the opportunity to have worked in Belton ISD, and it has really been a pleasure for me. And I would also say that I'm very appreciative of Dr. Smith and his leadership style, and I think you have a very bright future going forward with your team of 8.
Thank you, Dr. Mueller. Okay, now that, I'm sorry, Mr. Alcocer, go ahead.
Robert, I just want to say that you've gone beyond the call of duty. I guess most people in the public realm don't realize that you had actually planned your retirement a lot sooner than the June 30. So, I mean, that's a testament to you and the kind of person that you are. You put the interests of BISD before your own, and I commend you for that, and I thank you for that. So, you brought us through a really difficult time in the transition from, going from one superintendent and then the interim and then coming in. So part of the transition and how smooth that has been because of your leadership. So I appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it.
And just to be clear, you've been trying to retire for almost a year now, right?
It's been a while. It's been a while, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
You
I
bet.
echo everything that the board has said. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you bet.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda, Mike Morgan is going to talk to us about a resolution identifying hazardous traffic conditions.
Real quick, Sue, before
Chris.
Can I ask one last question about Lake Belton High School? So the security film that's being applied, like what can you tell us about that? Like, I don't know if performance rating is the right word, or what story should we be telling about the benefit of that, right?
Well, I can answer that. And is Jared still here? The 3M film that's being applied is not bulletproof, but it's shatterproof, so that if a bullet were to penetrate the doors, they would not shatter. They would just stay together. And it's a little opaque, so you really won't be able to see through it. It's not very transparent. So those two things together are the main features of that 3M film.
Okay. And so is that just on the exterior, or is that used in places in the interior as well?
It's just on the exterior. Well,
okay.
It's on the entrances. So the exterior and interior doors of the entrances.
Okay.
But it's just in those areas.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it. Sorry.
Okay.
Coach Morgan.
I see that Jared has returned. Do you want to ask anything else while Jared is here? Jared, did you want to add anything to that?
I think Dr. Mueller grabbed it. It's a film that we've used several places before and around the industry, and it basically is like a laminated glass.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Mike Morgan, hazardous resolution, we're ready.
Good evening, Madam President and Board of Trustees. It's my pleasure. Speaking of Dr. Mueller, and thanks to him, this was a presentation he made to y'all a year ago, and that is for a resolution for our 2020-21 hazardous routes. Just a little background, since this is one thing that we only discuss annually, is that students who live farther than 2 miles from their school automatically receive transportation. And in most cases, students who live within 2 miles of their school are considered to live in a walk zone and do not receive bus services. But there's an important exception to the walk zone requirements for students that live within 2 miles or who live within what is considered a hazardous route. They will receive bus transportation. School districts receive funding or transportation allotments to operate bus services from the state. The regular portion of this allotment is for students who live more than 2 miles from their school. The state also provides funding for up to 10% of a district's regular transportation allotment for the transportation of students who live within 2 miles of the school they attend but live in a hazardous route conditions. If a bus route loses the conditions that allow it to qualify as hazardous, the route is no longer eligible to receive hazardous route funding from the state. So I would like to thank Andrew Forrester and our transportation department. They've put a lot of work into this process. There's several considerations that go into determining whether a student lives within 2 miles of their school and lives on what we would consider a hazardous route. And some of those include sidewalk availability, the availability of designated and safe crosswalk areas, the availability and location of traffic lights, the complexity of the size of the road and what it would take to put crossing guards in effect. One of the things that we do see here is because of the rapid growth, a lot of times the subdivision or the neighborhood goes in first, and then the infrastructure as far as sidewalks, traffic lights, crosswalks, those sorts of things come in after the fact. So as you'll see, looking back at the past several years, our hazardous routes tend to change slightly from year to year just because of the increasing number of neighborhoods being built, the degree of infrastructure, and as that infrastructure becomes available to those neighborhoods. And then also for us with the opening of new campuses, it has altered some of our hazardous routes as well. I will tell you that as you look through the 12 hazardous routes that our transportation department has designated this year, 9 of our 10 elementary schools are affected with at least one neighborhood. All 4 of our middle schools are affected with at least one neighborhood, and both of our comprehensive high schools are affected with at least one neighborhood. There are 3 neighborhoods that, and groups of students at a certain level that have typically received transportation services that will no longer need those because of the new opening of our 2 secondary schools. So, and I'll kind of hit to those first, which is our Windmill Farm students, that our high school students will live within 2 miles of Belton High School, or Lake Belton High School, and do have safe and adequate sidewalking and routes to get to school. So those students who have been bused to Belton High School since that neighborhood was developed will walk to Lake Belton High School. We also have our our students that live at Dawson Ranch, who have been bused to South Belton Middle School over the past several years. Now with the opening of Belton Middle School, those students will live within 2 mile radius and do have safe and adequate sidewalking and other accommodations. And so as you saw in the agenda item, those 2 neighborhoods will be within 2 miles and will walk to school. We also have the Oak Hills region that will have walking to Lake Belton Middle School because of the improvements to Pea Ridge and Hogan Road and sidewalks that remove the hazardous paths. So as in the state law requires that if a route loses the conditions that made it hazardous, it will return and no longer be eligible. We do, however, bring to you tonight 12 different areas that we have deemed as hazardous routes. We would ask you to consider these 12 areas for approval, and would also say that all of these areas combined do contribute to less than 10% of our total busing population. So it would be within the state's requirements that we would be able to receive an allotment or funding for these students. So I would open it up at this point to any questions or discussion. We did not initially and choose to go in depth on all 12 of those routes, but would be more than happy to answer questions on any of those that you may have.
Board have any comments or questions?
No, I want to say thank you. This makes me very happy. I live on Loop 121. It's a very dangerous place for kids. And I do see kids walking, have seen them walking, you know, in the past, all the way from South Belton all the way up to the high school. And it's, you know, it's treacherous. So I'm happy that we have this allotment now to be able to take care of these kids and keep them safe. It's a good deal.
Thank you, Janet.
It is great. And I will point out as well that it's some of this inquiry comes from when parents call and say, well, what about my neighborhood? Especially with some of the rezoning that took place between North Belton and Lake Belton Middle Schools and with the opening of Belton Middle School. And I'll also pass on that our transportation department puts a lot of effort into making sure that all families are notified if there's any change in their routing, but particularly if they've gone from a normal routing schedule to a hazardous, or from a walking schedule to a hazardous, or vice versa. So in talking with our transportation department and Cheryl Simmons and her staff that works in routing, they'll take a lot of effort this summer to make sure families are notified and know about any changes or that comes about to their busing.
Thank you for that. Thank you for also ensuring that our kiddos are safe. At this time, is there a motion to approve this resolution as presented? Mr. Taggart, is there a second? Mr. Norwood, all in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Okay, Mr. Morgan, you're still up. Talk to us about the technology devices.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we have been working diligently, and we were working diligently all throughout the winter time to address and assess the long-term needs of our students and our devices. We've been working on continuing discussions back from Dr. Kincannon team through our interim with Dr. Battershell and into Matt's assembling of his team, and kind of where we want to be, how we want to get there, and ultimately what do we need in terms of providing our students with quality instruction, and how that relates to devices and how we get those devices into our campuses. If you'll recall, in March, you approved a plan to provide new Chromebooks for Belton High School grades 9 through 12, Lake Belton High School grades 9 and 10, and Belton Middle School students for the 2020-21 school year, along with a continued replacement of 9th grade MacBooks at New Tech. Since that time, a lot has happened. A lot has happened in our with what we've had to do to provide instruction to our students because of the COVID-19 closures. And it has caused us to come back and quickly reevaluate where we want to end up and how we want to get there. And we really had two concerns with our long-term technology plan. First and foremost was to increase the density of our elementary devices. We had done some work over the past couple of years to try to get to a 4-to-1 ratio at our 4th and 5th grade campuses, our elementary campuses for our 4th and 5th grade students. And we also knew that the second priority that we were going to have was to phase out the iPads from our middle schools and get all of our middle schools and high schools into a device that we felt like was a little more along lines of what we wanted to do instructionally, and that was a Chromebook. Since the COVID-19 closure, we feel like that we have a need to go ahead and increase those two, the response to those two needs more rapidly. meaning increase our density at our elementary campuses and go ahead and try to get to a more quick replacement of our middle school devices. So we took part, we looked at all of our different options and how could we get there. Instead of a 3-year plan, we've kind of condensed this down to a plan of something that we felt like we could accomplish this spring. It will allow us to get to a point, because of the uncertainties in the fall, where we can guarantee instructional quality to all of our students and also do it in a way where we can have more devices readily available, particularly at the elementary level, if we do have to go to remote instruction. Keep in mind that this is not a plan to get us immediately to one-to-one with all students. It is a plan to get us to the point where at our elementary campuses, some students would be one-to-one, some students would operate under a classroom set. And I would kind of like to go into kind of the details of where, if we are able to implement the plan that's proposed tonight, kind of where we would be at the end of that proposal. So it would allow us to go ahead and move to Chromebooks at all 4 middle schools for the 2021-22 school year. It would allow us to, at grades 5, 4, and 3, to have Chromebooks available for every 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade student. It would allow us to take the Chromebooks that we already own, which are 786, and combine that with 78 more Chromebooks, where we could get to a Chromebook level where all of our 2nd grade students could use a Chromebook, and we would repurpose existing iPads that we currently own for our kindergarten and 1st grade students. So we would actually be in a position where when we start school in the fall, we would accomplish the 2 goals that kind of were our 3-year plan, which was to replace middle school iPads with Chromebooks and to increase our density at the elementary campuses. We feel like this would give us an opportunity to be very, very flexible in the instructional quality that we can provide, and we have the need to implement a technology plan K through 12, we feel like this would give us an option to do that. Now, obviously, increasing devices to this regard in 1 year creates some concerns and maybe some complications financially. So we've looked at several different options, from purchasing to leasing to combinations of leasing and purchasing. And Jennifer Land is going to partner with me tonight to kind of talk about what some of the options and where we are in those options. And then we would be more than willing to answer any and all questions from a technology standpoint, from a financial standpoint, or for a curriculum standpoint on what this proposal would mean for the district. So I'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk about just the different options that we've been able to come up with financially to make this happen.
So we have explored whether to lease the devices or whether to direct purchase them. We are still obtaining quotes or some information from vendors regarding leasing. I will share with you that our preferred method is we're leaning toward leasing, simply to preserve fund balance as much as we can, and also to allow us to spread some of that cost out in future years. But like I said, we are waiting to get some more information regarding what the leases could look like, and to understand whether or not it's going to be more beneficial for us to lease or to direct buy. So if we decide to lease, we'll come back to you at a later time with leasing documents to procure, for you to approve. The other thing that we're looking at is timing. With the lease, we're trying to nail down how long it might take us to get the devices in versus outright buying them. So that's also being weighed in or factored into our consideration for those devices.
Board, if I may add one thing in all of this too, is that as Jennifer has articulated in all this, we're trying to be thoughtful about technology replacement cycles, cost, but also the instructional use in all of this. I will tell you that based on my feedback from teachers across the district and meeting with elementary school teachers through Zoom, we have heard loud and clear teacher frustration with devices at the elementary level being working and able to use in a thoughtful instructional fashion. I think this is a wise investment, not only if we are face-to-face, but obviously if we have instructional needs where we're in a remote setting as well. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is, we're doing a thoughtful plan for how to actually purchase them, but they're also meeting a very clear instructional need from our teachers' perspective as well.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Mr. Flora, I believe I saw your hand.
Yeah, I've got just a couple of questions. So is this in the budget that we saw earlier, the proposed budget, in any way, shape, or form?
The lease payments have not been calculated into future years, but if you recall, we still had some money left, or we anticipate having some money contributed to fund balance. That was over $2 million. Mm-hmm. So we can either afford at this time to outright buy, or like I said, preserve fund balance, make one lease payment this year and try and then build the lease payments into the subsequent year's budget.
Okay. As far as supply chain is concerned, I mean, have we looked into the supply chain, and are we going to potentially have issues getting the number of devices that we're talking about?
That's part of the procurement timeline, and that's something else that we're looking at and okay. weighing that option on the lease versus buy.
So for the devices that we approved, I don't know, seems like a couple months ago, did we have problems with getting those devices?
No, we haven't, Chris. Those devices are here, and they've been set up, and we're ready to issue in August. So that was not an issue. That was a little over 3,000 devices, and this second piece will be about 5,300 total devices. I will say this too, as far as the payment aspect of it, we had a 4-year plan to do these devices over 4 years. So if we lease or purchase, we may pay a little more up front, but we may have some savings on the tail end of some devices that we won't have to purchase in 22, 23, and
sure.
2022.
Sure.
Can I add that even though we have not specifically put the lease payment in future years' budget, we do anticipate that it would be an offset of the dollar amounts that we have included in the future year's budget for device replacement. So it's highly likely that our budget would not change much.
Okay, that makes sense. So the last question is, as far as supporting these devices, do we anticipate needing more people to keep these things running and maintained and up to shape?
That's a great question, and one that we've talked through with our technology department. And the beauty of it is that the time and effort it takes to keep the Chromebooks up and running is far less than for the aged iPads that we had. So we don't feel like that it's going to be a substantial strain. It just may take some additional training for our elementary tech agents that haven't had to deal with the devices on this level, but we feel like that the Chromebook is very user-friendly, and we feel like with some additional training and support that they will be okay. But from a secondary perspective, this actually, from what I'm being told, it's going to take a little bit of time off of what our campus techs have to do to keep these devices up and running.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no takers, is there a motion to approve as presented? Anybody? Everybody? I'm sorry, Mr. Taggart. There's a second by Miss Janet Lee. All in favor, please raise your hand. My screen has multiplied out this way. You all used to be this way. Now you're this way. So I'm having to do this. Okay. Thank you. That passes. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. So the next item, board request for new information and or reports. You got any requests, Mr. Floor? You're on mute, sir. You're muted.
All right, I'm excited about the technology piece, right? I would love, once we get some of these things up and running, if we could get a demo of the anticipated usage and the interface and all of that. I mean, I learned a little bit at the end of the last school year about Schoology, but would love to see it in action. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Nope. We'll move on to our calendar of events. I'll start off by saying that Mr. Taggart reminded you all about Wednesday and about the tour of the new Lake Belton High School and looking at Jill's new desk that she can't get to just now, but let's all go see it. And then July 20th is our next scheduled board meeting. I'm going to come back to the fact that we have June 18th graduation. And Ty, I don't know about you, because you know you have a graduate, I have a graduate. I'm so excited that he gets to walk across the stage on Thursday. And so Dr. Smith was going to just kind of share, just kind of an overview about what that looks like. And thank you, Michael Morgan, and all the other ones that put this together. I'm so happy. Go ahead, Dr. Smith.
I'm gonna let Mike and Elizabeth chime in. They've been key leaders for us in all of this with Ben and Genesee, as you all know. This has been a feat in a real testament to the leadership of some of our leaders in Belton ISD. I am so excited to see our students face to face and provide a personalized graduation experience for our families because our kids deserve it. And so I'm very thankful for the leadership that our team has been providing in all of this, and for your patience as a board, because we held off a little bit to see what we could do. We did our best in creating the best plan that we thought for our kids in our community and in keeping them safe, but also providing them a real quality experience in graduation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Elizabeth to give us any final details on graduation on Thursday that they'd like to share.
I'll be happy to go ahead and start. A little bit of just some data since we all spoke on the phone and kind of talked through the plan and listened to feedback, is the response rate has been incredible. We feel like between both campuses, we're going to have well over 700, nearing 750 students and their families represented, which when you do the math, that will be somewhere over 4,000 people that will cross the stage that day. So we're really excited about that aspect. There have been a lot of people and you know, great thanks and kudos to our high school principals. They all came together, Ben Smith and Genesee for their campuses, but also Jill Ross for stepping up and helping kind of coordinate and kind of be as an organizer of some of the workflow and some of those things, and especially Elizabeth Cox and Becca and their whole communications team and the behind the scenes that they've played in this. So it is going to be a great day. We went over this afternoon with the administrative staff of both high schools, and we walked the parade route. We walked the route of where the graduates will be, and we made sure that every detail is looked at. And it's going to be a special day. It's going to be a fun day, and it's going to end with a beautiful fireworks show. Hopefully that the whole community can enjoy, and send these graduates off in a way that they deserve after the unusual and the unfortunate way that their senior year ended, and all the little things that they had to miss out on along the way. So we're really excited for them and for their families. And I think of the most special part of it, and this is something that Ty Taggart has pointed out to me, is going to be that when those families get to stand on the stage and one of those parents or grandparents or guardians get to hand that graduate the diploma and get their picture taken, it's going to be a very, very special moment. And we'll make up a little bit for what those students have lost. So we're excited about it. We think it's going to be a fun day. We all realize it's going to be a little less ceremonial than a normal graduation ceremony, and hopefully a lot more festive. And we're hoping that people have a great experience while they're with us.
Thank you for that. You know, people keep using words like unprecedented. This is challenging times. So this graduation, so it doesn't have all the pomp and circumstance, but it doesn't need to have it, right? So it needed to be big and different. This is so exciting. Our graduates were almost robbed of a moment that they can't ever get back. And look at what we did. Look at what BISD is doing. BISD, I love you guys. The planning and thought that goes into everything that we do for our kiddos is top-notch, world class. So thank you from a parent standpoint. Thank you. I'm a big crybaby, sorry. So anything else? Anybody else have any comments or questions or discussion items? If Mr. Taggart.
Real quick, there's been a lot of tears shed at the Taggart house this semester too, so I'm going to get through this real quick. I can't beat what you just said. I just want to echo it. Thank y'all, all of y'all on the team, for what you've done. Every little thing, from the media posts to everything, book pickup, the cap and gown pickup, whatever they did, every little thing that y'all did meant so much to these seniors. I promise you it did. Thank y'all from the bottom of my heart for what y'all have put into this, because y'all have put y'all's heart into this too. Thank
you. Absolutely. Well, if there's nothing further, I'm going to go dry my tears of happiness, tears of joy. This meeting is adjourned at 8:33. Have a great evening, guys.